cancel that. There we go. Go to YouTube. Oh man. Oh man, nobody's gonna come watch me though. Not now. History. Okay, here's what I had. History. It's okay. Okay, here we go. All right. Well, apparently my camera will not work. Oh, now all of a sudden it does work, so that's great. Okay, well, I'm streaming. I have no idea if anybody's here. Camera started working. I saw Brentley just went live, but I already started, and people can rewatch this later because I'm gonna do a repeat or a continuation of what I was doing before, which was to look at Jaron's debatism channel, where he had Lucas and Peter versus um, Shane and Alan. Shane and Alan defending aether cosmology, basically saying that the Michelson Morley experiment, the Saginaw effect, etc., is proof of an aether, which was what was originally proposed. And the other thing I did that I think was probably useful for me is this weekend I spent some time working on revisiting some of my knowledge about relativity, which is not super deep. I had a quick chat with our buddy Dr. Dr. Tapioca Weasel. Is a very kind friend to me and spent some time with me twice this weekend. Once going through some math with me to make sure that I understood some of the relativity math. It was a small amount of it, but looking at relativistic math because I've been practicing my math and trying to expand and learn math that I studied in high school and haven't really looked at a lot, some of it in that time. So I've come back to it. Also, before I get into this, I'm just going to make note that yesterday, yesterday I had a joyful and somewhat sad opportunity to gather with some friends who I haven't seen in a long time, and with whom we had to gather to say goodbye to a good friend of ours from back in high school days, and of course going back to learning again, which is something I've redone multiple times in my life in a way, but not in an organized way, I guess. So basically, I'm starting to do this again, but I visited with a bunch of friends from high school, and one of those friends actually we go back to probably grade 1 for sure, possibly kindergarten, senior or junior kindergarten. We don't remember. Our parents don't remember. Um, yeah, and actually our parents, well, my dad died, but my parents lived, and my mother still lives in the same neighborhood as my good friend I grew up with, and it's great to see him again. It's been a while, but I've actually had the great opportunity to work with a number of my friends and spend time with them off and on. What we realized is the last joyful occasion we all got together for um, was last year, and we weren't all there. Some of us couldn't make it, and prior to that, a bunch of us got together, and it was 8 years ago, and we celebrated our 40th birthday collectively at that time. And it's one of those things that as you get older, more and more people pass away, and it just happens. But um, it's a good time to reflect on the fact that we don't have forever here. And in that vein, I'm trying to better my knowledge and understanding of things. And so when I do that and see that we have over 100 years of development um, on this subject and research and tests and experiments, and then see that some people are saying, "Nah, that's not what I want to believe." That's fair. Beliefs are fair. I'm not going to stop people from believing things. It's perfectly all right to believe without question if that's what you want to do. I'm not into that. And the thing that worries me the most is that they say the same things. Sort of. They think they're saying the same thing as scientists say. And they're saying that scientists and scientism is a religion, and I just want to address this. It's been addressed many times before, but I just want to give my 2 cents and my opinion or the way I come at this is that when someone says something and you say, "Wait, hold on. It's time to have a look at this. What's actually happening?" Don't leap to conclusions. Don't say, "Ah, I know what this is." Now, in my previous career, people would call me up sometimes and say, "I got this kind of a problem," and after talking to them for a minute or 2, 9 times out of 10, I'd maybe already know what I was going to deal with. But a lot of times it's like, I really don't know. The person I was talking to doesn't speak the same jargonese I speak. And so their description of things sometimes isn't super accurate. Not because they don't want to be accurate, but because they're unable to they're unable to speak super accurately because they don't know the terms. And so what's interesting here is that Alan and Shane know some of the terms. They even use some of them correctly. What they're doing wrong is ignoring the evidence. And why they're ignoring that evidence, I think, is due to a dogmatic belief. And there's a point at which they can't get beyond the dogma. And I don't know either of these guys well enough to know where that comes from. Sometimes it's religiously based, like they literally have a religion that says, the earth must be flat. The earth must be the center of the universe. God made this earth special, that sort of thing. He made humans special to tend this earth, to look after it. Um, but also the same religion, the way they spin some of it is like, and this earth is a hellhole. It's a punishment for eating an apple. It wasn't an apple, probably, but for eating a piece of fruit. For a woman who didn't know that it was wrong to eat the piece of fruit, who was told it was fine to eat the piece of fruit by an animal who may or may not have been a serpent or a snake or something, and la di la di la, and now we're all here fighting about whether relativity is true. Is relativity complete? Is another question. Do we have a cohesive model of everything? And I'll just address that quickly to say, no, we don't. We don't have everything figured out, and we probably never will. What we will do is we will continually hone down and file at our knowledge and test and figure things out and eventually our hypotheses will come together and become something. Hey, native atheist, welcome, welcome. I'm awake. I'm feeling relatively good, and I'm just going to talk about this thing that was on Jaren's channel. And despite the fact that I find Jaren to be have some objectionable points of view, he is coming around to admitting that there would be a problem in this final experiment. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think maybe Will Duffy actually confirmed that Jaron and Austin are actually going to go to Antarctica. I'm not 100% sure. I watched a lot of stuff off and on, and I was up and down over the weekend in terms of how I was feeling. And my wife hasn't been feeling great, so she actually was sleeping in a separate bed for a couple of nights to make sure that I didn't catch another infection, which kind of sucked for both of us because I didn't get to have her with me as much as I usually do. But I also, well, we're usually sleeping anyway, but she also got a really sore back. And I said, you seem to be getting over the little cold or whatever. Come sleep in a real bed because this is stupid. You're destroying your body doing this. So please don't. Anyway, she's back at it, and I haven't gotten reinfected or more sick. I did realize yesterday that I'm still not where I need to be. My health is such that what would have been nothing for the average person was a major deal for me, which was sitting with my friends chatting. That wasn't so bad. I actually got up to speak and say a few words about my friend and our memories together. It was really nice to give me an opportunity to do that. But also, importantly, just walking, I'm going to say maybe 50 meters each direction. Both times I was really, really tired, and my wife drove us home. We were out of the house for less than 8 hours total, and I couldn't. I could keep my eyes open, but I was tired. I was worn out. By the time I'd been sitting in the car halfway home, I probably could have driven again. But I just decided to just keep relaxing and let my wife do that, which is not something we usually do because my wife doesn't like driving. She particularly doesn't like driving in the city, and because I'm born and raised there, I kind of usually take that on. And I got us there, but I didn't get us back. So that's kind of where I'm at health wise with this conversation with this science. I tried to re up my knowledge. One of the things I'm not super up to date on is the muon question, which will come up in the debate today. And I hope I have the energy to just go through the rest of this video. I'm gonna let these folks chat and say what they're gonna say. I'll jump in when I think there's something to say. I think it's important that we have, hey, Spooky, welcome. I realized that Brentley's streaming, but I started streaming before I realized he was on, and I figure this is the kind of video you can come back to and watch later. I don't know how many people are going to have input, but certainly if you're if you're an erudite person and have knowledge of relativity and the aether cosmology that preceded it, and maybe like the way this is put, and I'm going to just say this too because it is confusing. Peter and Lucas are presenting relativity as the natural development from aether cosmology, and I'll also say that the basic concept of aether, in case anybody isn't familiar, and because I think I said this in the last video, but I'm just going to say it again today, is that there's a medium that waves travel through, because we know mechanical style waves like sound and waves in water and stuff, they behave in a similar way, and you can measure electromagnetic radiation, which also moves in a wave pattern. The presumption that all waves have to move through matter is broken down by the observation that these types of radiation do not need matter to move through. And even more interesting is that, like sound, which is super hard to get through solid material, and some solid materials will actually stop sound. And interestingly, lead, which is something you don't want to eat, but we used to use lead in construction for sound proofing, but we also used it for building medical and dental spaces where X-rays were in use, because lead is dense enough to stop not just sound waves, but that density also will stop or severely curtail electromagnetic radiation, if it's thick enough. Electromagnetic radiation is neat in that some of it can pass through solid objects, what we call solid matter, um, or matter that's in a solid phase. Um, and that's an interesting thing. I don't think that's going to come up here. There are other things that are super neat that we could talk about, like neutrinos that can pass through solid objects, um, seemingly unfettered. That's a different conversation for a different day. I won't get into that. But muons are these cosmic rays or particles that come down to Earth, and they have a very short half life. And I think they'll mention this here. So you'll have these muons, you'll have this aether, and the aether also, like, because there's this assumption that there'd be directionality through the aether, that you would notice that waves would be disrupted or moved by that, because if you shot a wave through something that would move, it was moving, it would move, right? Like if you shout into the wind, for instance, the wind could carry that sound wave. It could break it up and distort it. But if it's moving, the sound would carry in one direction over another. And so the idea is that light would be shifted or moved by this aether or ether wind. And that's not something we actually observe. So these guys will get into this. The other thing about this aether is that aether represents a reference frame that's unchanging and unmoving, and is a base reference frame, if you will, or a preferred reference frame is sometimes brought up. But in relativity, it's important that we remember that there is no preferred reference frame. And I explained last time, and I'll say this again, I don't think I have this wrong at all. I think that there are no 2 points that are the same reference frame. Not literally speaking, not technically speaking, but if you and I, anyone that's watching, if you and I were sitting side by side in, say, like a movie theater or a moving vehicle or whatever, we would, for all intents and purposes, share a reference frame. Although if you think about it, there's times where this happened to me last night. My wife's like, "Hey, look at the moon," and she was on one side of the vehicle, and I was on the other side of the vehicle. I could not see it without changing where my head was, because her reference frame gave her a view of the moon from where she sat, and mine did not. And we were only separated by a couple of feet, really. If you were to measure center of head to center of head, we have a relatively small family SUV. Um, it's a Honda Passport, just to put it in sort of an idea of where we're at when we sit side by side. Our elbows sort of touch on the center console armrest thing. We're not squished together like we would be in a really small car, but just that little bit of difference, because there's solid objects in the way, because the car has a roof, and because there's different pillars and stuff. Two different people looking at something will see it differently, or not see something at all. I think we all understand how that can happen. And so, but when we comes to relativistic speeds, we'll talk about it, relativistic distances. Things happen. We wouldn't sit there in the car and see something straight in front of us where there's nothing blocking our view. A whole lot different, but we would have two different angles. Smaller than protons, neurons, electrons. All a bit of a soup to you, Spooky. Okay, well, I don't know if soup is the right word here, Spooky, but I appreciate that comment. I appreciate you coming by. And certainly people can chat here. When it comes to particle physics, I'm hoping we can get our buddy Dr. Tap to come here and chat with me. Again, he said he will, but he's very busy, and he's been extremely tied up recently with papers that he and his colleagues are writing. And they've made one, they've submitted it, and they're waiting to see if it'll get approved for publication. I think they've done some really neat work. I haven't read their whole paper, but I've read through a bunch of what they're publishing. And when it gets published for real, I think he'll probably share it to people that are interested, and I might even share it and have him come talk about it. There's another paper he's working on as well, and the work he does is really cool. And I have a video on my channel here. If you go, it's a Thanksgiving weekend video from last year, and it's something like "We Chill a Tom," and talk about this, because what we're talking about is like the way he the way he takes the temperature of a single atom and reduces it to something extremely close to 0 Kelvin. That's a pretty cool video. Anyway, I've had a 20-minute long introduction, and I forgot to play my intro video, so I'm going to just make sure I have this here ready to go. I do got to stop this because I have to share this. So I'm going to present. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share this tab. I'm going to share it here. And if I go here, and I'll do this where I make myself little in the corner here, you can see what's going on. And I'll start playing this, and we'll see what's said and how it works.
If it were not the case that light were isotropic, and
I'm just gonna like back this up ever so slightly, so we're at I'm gonna back it up because isotropic is isotropic means that things are all the same in all directions. And anisotropic means that there's a difference in things. You're like something isn't maybe the word would be smooth or uniform. Those are different words people might use. This is a word. Anisotropic is a word that Witless Word Salad loves throwing out there. I think he likes to throw it out about the anisotropic nature of the CMB and some other things. I don't know if he understands what that means, but the fact of the matter is, even though things average out to be the same, there are blips. There are things that are different. And so things at that scale are anisotropic, but they're going to get into this. I can't remember exactly where they're going, but this is Lucas, who is Sea Lion Prime, I think, on Discord, and I think that's how he shows up in chats. And then Peter, I forget what Peter's name is. He's a complicated handle online. Is against Shane St. Pierre and Alan from Space Audit. So I'll run this again, see how this goes.
So what is the consequences of the constancy of the speed of light for the Einstein-Maxwell equations? And why is it important?
That you will experience link contraction and time dilation if you're in the moving frame. And that time and space are not absolute.
So when we speak specifically to the extension of the Maxwell equations within the Einstein-Maxwell theory, what is the effect of the speed of light on the laws of electromagnetism within those places? That's a simple question. What is the effect of the speed of light within that frame?
I don't understand the question.
Shane, do you understand the question? Okay, so if it were not the case that light were isotropic, and we have two mechanisms to explain an anisotropy in light: a preferred direction and absolute frame, or relativity. Do you agree with that distinction? That those are the two primary ways that we could explain an anisotropic distribution. Okay. What would be the consequences if neither of those were true?
Oh, I got you. So Maxwell derived the speed of light based off magnetic permeability and electric permittivity. And what he was doing, so that gives you the average speed of the speed of light in a vacuum, right? Now, experimentally, they measured that. And then when they get into more precise measurements with interferometry, they notice that the speed is slightly faster and slightly slower going with and against the east and west directions. That was used to measure quote unquote Earth rotation, but it's measured through the fluctuation of the minimum and maximum dimensions in that speed difference throughout the day, which corresponds to sidereal time when they plot it on a graph. So they equate that to Earth rotation. 1 second. So the consequences are that the speed of light is slightly faster and slightly slower, and it's measured relative to the velocity of the observer. There's no real consequence or anything that's going to break it or whatever, right? Because actually, what Einstein proposed to solve Galilean invariance for.
Okay, so Alan's going on here. Alan's actually like he's one of the smarter folks in the flat Earth sort of area, and he's got the space audits thing, and I guess I should look into him more. And I'll listen more to some of the things he says. Now, what he's saying here is right, because what's good here, and I think it's important to point this out, is he's understanding the other side, the one he doesn't agree with. Um, he's gonna start making, I think, his if I remember correctly, he's gonna start making his pitch or his argument for why um all of modern science is wrong, and everything that Einstein, Maxwell, Schrodinger, trying to think of, there's a whole bunch of people that were involved in this. A lot of people made some like really amazing contributions to this whole thing. And um the argument, when he starts talking about this Galilean stuff, and so he's going to start going back to all the observations that were made, centuries before, which were great observations. But he's gonna ignore or discount what's been done since then, because what they observed wasn't wrong. Those were the observations they could make then. We can make more precise observations and measurements now, and then we can analyze that data. We can also importantly, not just analyze it, but we can do more experimentations and checks on that. So I'll let him keep going and say what he's saying. I think it will continue to be interesting to look at this and talk about what they're saying and how they're saying it. And I think a lot of my commentary will be also like on how they address things and how they handle, like how science minded people versus dogma minded people handle what's in front of them.
For Maxwell's equations was to use partial differentials for the time coordinates, right? And on the inverse of that, you can use absolute time and a partial differential for the moving frame, but the math is more rigorous, and it's actually, but it leads to first order invariance, because when you do that, there's a leftover velocity component that you can use um, for the observer, and that was known as the Maxwell-Hertz equations. Now, those were disregarded in favor of Einstein's theory.
So, but you're not quite answering the question though, and I'm not sure what you're. Sorry. So
There's no
clarify a little bit.
mathematical. There's no consequences, dude. They both use the same. They both use the same. Like the problem was the same. They just solved it slightly differently. One uses absolute time and a differential for the moving
Okay,
frame,
okay.
and the other one uses two differentials for time. Like
But let's
T will
cut
be.
this out though a little bit, because what I asked was under the assumption that neither of those explained the anisotropy, there would be consequences for the Maxwell equations, and I'm not sure you understand what those consequences would be. Shane, do you have a response to that?
So I appreciate what Lucas is doing here, because Alan said a lot of words. He acknowledged some of what's happening, but rather than just answer this, which is to say, like, what would we see if this were true, he's adding in a bunch of other stuff. And Lucas is pointing this out. He's gone on to talk about other topics that at least are not unrelated to the overall question. And he said so much, I don't even remember the exact question, but the exact question, the basis of the question is like, what would the entailments be of the measurements taken, and what would it say about light and electromagnetic radiation, or the observations that were made. And Alan, rather than say, well, that would you would expect to see this result, which is what Lucas is getting at. Alan told us a bunch of things about the topic without answering what the expected result was, or what the hypothesis would be if you had one thing or another, or looking back at the tested hypothesis, what's the next step? What would we see? One of the things he did talk about was like the time dilation, length contraction situation that happens in relativity. He mentioned that, and that's part of it, but also um, the tests that we're talking about were sort of an interferometry style test, where light is being split and sent around and recombined. So you have this that's in the interferometry thing with the Sagnac effect, which they'll bring up. Um, how do you explain that, why that happens? And then what Alan's saying is, like, they use this to measure that the Earth was moving, and he brought up the sidereal day. This is something also that flat earthers often get into. The sidereal day is how the Earth rotation on its axis creates a day period where you're right back exactly where you were in reference to the stars in the sky, which I did a video recently on why we see celestial rotation or star trails rotating one way in the northern hemisphere and another way on the southern hemisphere when compared to the pole stars, which is a whole nother thing which Witless really doesn't get. Austin Whitsitt, apparently he's doubled down and tripled down on that. I don't know why, but the sidereal day is one thing. Then we have the solar day, which is basically when we come back to the exact same spot facing the sun again, or when the sun, when the sunrise hits the Greenwich Mean Time line or whatever. That's that like from the 24-hour period. The thing is, the 24-hour periods aren't exactly 24 hours, and they seem to the flat earthers seem to get hung up on the fact that they're not the exact same amount of time, a sidereal rotation versus a solar rotation. And it's easily explained by orbital mechanics and doing a bunch of math, but they don't like that answer, and they don't believe in orbits, they don't believe in gravity, they don't believe in movement through space. So I think their usual argument on the stupid side of it is these two things don't match each other, so obviously we're not moving at all, when there's a very good answer for it. And that's typical of some of this stuff. So I'll let the debate play again, because I want to hear more about what they're saying. But I do, when I hear them bring up these buzzwords, I just want to point out those buzzwords are often brought up because they know that their audience, who believe what they're selling, and many of whom donate money to them so they can make money doing this, those folks are who they depend on. So they're talking to them in language they understand, or they think they understand, more to the point. And I wanted to point that out and also say that there is absolutely no problem with the sidereal and solar day not being the same thing.
I'm waiting to go back to the lab frame with Peter. So whenever you guys are done.
Well, I just think that this one's important because
the speed of light's never been measured as isotropic, though, right? Like when it comes down to interferometry measurements, the speed varies relative to the latitude, so the consequences aren't as dire as you're making it.
Okay, well, let's dig into that a little bit. So where's your evidence?
Your question has been answered in full. My evidence is all interferometry experiments that measure the speed of light being varied relative to the latitude.
Maybe we can answer this question in a simpler way, or reset a little bit. So I am a little bit confused. I heard from Alan that there is an absolute lab frame. It is on Earth. We agree. Within the Earth, we can narrow this down.
Okay, hey Sumami. You get zoned out when you're downloading custom game content. Well, I don't blame you, Sumami. Welcome, Sumami. And okay, so one thing I'll note here is that Peter and Shane's picture and name tags got reversed, and I don't know what program Jaren uses for this. I've had stuff like that happen. I've seen stuff like that happen where you hit something or whatever. It took you 30 minutes to unlatch your turd brain from that shit. Okay. Do you mean you want to come in and help me dissect this, Sumami? I can post an invite if people want to come in. Or if you mean that you want to just watch and chat, that's fine too. I'll just post the invite anyway, because that won't hurt anything. I won't let people in if they're, or I'll kick them out if they do something dumb. But I don't think that would be anyone around here. So yeah, if you want to come in, if you want to talk relativity with me and talk about this, that's fine. So they're going to get into the lab frame, the preferred reference frame, and I believe Shane and Alan are they're going to talk about where where this preferred frame is. And so I'll let this run again, and we'll come back to talk some more.
Onto the Earth. Within the Earth, though, and this is where I'm not getting it, maybe Shane can explain. speed of light is constant for two observers or is not? Which is your claim? Our claim is that it is constant. If I am moving away from sea lion on Earth on a train, I will not be running away from light. I will still measure the speed of light to be c, or whatever it is in air, and he will measure it as such. And he's not in a better place in Colorado than I am in Washington, where light travels differently, or there's a select direction in which it tends to travel. Can you explain that? Where is the absolute lab frame? Where is it physically located on Earth?
Let's just define lab frame real quick before we get lost in the muck. And you guys took 3 like running leaps before we started to walk, right? So lab frame, typically defined as the reference frame where the measuring apparatus or observer is at rest, right? You have to have that in the physics experiments. It's compared and contrasted with usually with the center of mass frame when doing relativity, right? But one requires constant transformations of results back to one and one does not. Can you guess which one? Absolutely. The lab frame is the only one that doesn't require transformations back to. It's an Earth-based reference, non-inertial frame for the observer at rest. Now, when you're doing relativistic considerations in the lab for experimentation, and you're going to say plain fantasy land, you have to put it into a fantasy coordinate system and a fantasy translation. That's why you have covariant transforms and all that wonderful stuff with the math tricks that get played. So when we're talking about where's the lab frame on Earth, Peter, that's a retarded question.
So when I'm moving in relation to... Go ahead.
Okay, I mean, this is... Sorry, I was trying to type... I said fuck my fingers, which nobody has to literally do, especially not without consent. I have big fingers and they're hitting too many keys. So even though I usually blame my phone, I'm on a laptop here and I'm still can't hit the damn things. And the keyboard's still set to French. Anyway, yes. Mama Ember, yeah, she's very, very much an erudite speaker on this subject. And we'd love to have her input. I assume she's probably out trucking. I want to get back to trucking. And I thought I was getting better enough to do it. And I convinced myself that. But you know what? I made it down the stairs in one go without stopping to take a breath to come down here. Going up the stairs probably won't be in one go, but I'm going to jump on the treadmill. I probably won't be doing any literal jumping. I'm still pretty hobbly, but I do move better today than I've moved a week ago. So that's good. And I have physio today. I come check my progress. So that'll be good too. So Shane he's trying to tell his followers there's no way he's gonna change the minds of people that understand what's being said in relativity. He's saying this is a fantasy. Well, it's not a fantasy, it's something that you do. He's talking about the transformations. And it's important in relativity when you use a space-time diagram, it's easy to see this, that when you have two reference frames that are separated from one another for lots of different reasons, including the fact that they're traveling at different rates of speed, they're separated by great distances. This is not just about like how you see what's in front of you in a small space in what we might consider the same reference frame for these purposes. Like if we're here on Earth and we see a supernova happen, how would that be seen from another galaxy, for instance? And would it be seen at the same time? Well, the answer is it wouldn't be. And in fact, the way we move around in space-time, a lot of us have different reference frames, but we don't know if there's anybody else anywhere to see these things. But we can imagine ourselves in another place, seeing it from a different place, or seeing it from, say, like a spaceship traveling at a different speed. And we know that there are objects traveling at different speeds, and we know that light travels at a constant speed c. And so what Shane's doing here is sort of poisoning the well by saying that the only real reference frame is our stationary Earth, and that's the lab frame that we should be choosing. But he's saying that like when we do these calculations to see what would happen were you in these situations, some of that is exercises to help teach people doing physics what's going on. But the fact of the matter is we also do actual calculations that work using E = mc² and other many other formulae that go with that. Those things actually work when people that know what they're doing do it. I am not going to claim to be that person yet. I hope to be that person eventually. I'm going to keep working at learning it. I've spent most of my career learning other things. But what Shane's saying here is not all garbage, but it's mostly garbage. And it's mostly designed to A, muddy the waters for people that don't know what's going on, for the layperson, and B, for his followers who've heard these scripts before to say, you know, you can't trust these science people because they're being honest and saying, if we take this as our base reference frame and look at what's going on in two other places, those two reference frames will be different and we have to transform what's going on. Well, of course you fucking do, Shane. I don't understand why you're pretending it's imaginary. We are using our imaginations. And smart people do use their imaginations to understand something, because some things are concepts and some things are concepts that describe what could really be happening in a couple of places or what is really happening in a couple of places. But if you don't understand what's going on, you just don't understand it. And then you do this, you know, this weird pigeon chess thing, I guess. Shane is far less erudite than Alan. And so we're going to see that as it goes on. But I just wanted to point that out. And they got Peter's name tag and Shane's name tag in the right spot. Hey Joe, how you doing? Good to see you. Welcome. We're talking relativity versus aether cosmology here. So I'm gonna roll the tape again because I think Shane and Peter are gonna go at it some more.
Because there was something that Alan said that I think was really important, and it would play off of what Shane said.
Apparently, I meant.
So you had mentioned an issue with measuring the the speed of light is isotropic. Could you describe a little bit more why that's an issue and why that has not been measured in your view?
You mean it varies in east-west direction constantly? How is that constant in isotropic? It's definitely not.
So, but let me think about this way. So if we're in a particular location, is it possible to measure a one-way speed of light within your lab frame?
Yes, using GPS, those are one-way measurements of the speed of light.
So wait a minute. So the GPS is within your lab frame?
GPS sends signals one way from the satellite to your receiver. That's measured with a time difference.
In an Earth-centered, right?
So that's a one-way speed.
So your claim is that GPS provides a one-way measurement of the speed of light. Could you support that with research? When has that been measured?
The range measurement equation every time it snapshots
every
time
GPS is used. So
can you walk us through it? Walk us through it step by step.
I got you. So check this out. And this will answer Peter's questions too about the speed of light and who can measure it with what, right? So suppose you have a moving train with people on it and they all have GPS receivers, and suppose there's a stationary lad on a platform with a GPS receiver. At the time where the train intersects with the stationary lad, a GPS signal hits the train and the lad that's on the platform. Everybody gets their signals, but there will be a proportional delay to the observers in the moving frame, right? It's just like any other wave. Sonar works the exact same way, and it uses the same range measurement equation.
So what is the range measurement equation? What is the distinction between range and pseudo range for GPS?
The range measurement equation tells you the distance based off, well, it sends a snapshot of the time of when the satellite, where its location was in coordinates. And then you get the difference of when it was received times the speed of light.
Something like R sub bar, T sub bar minus R sub S, T sub S equals what? C times T of R minus T of S, which is the actual range measurement equation in ECI, right?
Okay, so what these guys are arguing about is, I don't even think they're arguing at this point, but they brought up the one-way speed of light. The one-way speed of light has not yet been tested, I don't think. I've come up with what I think is a great way to test the one-way speed of light, but it's physically not yet possible. I'll do another video on that. And I'm going to see if I can strong arm Dr. Tap into doing that with me, because he's not sure if I'm right or wrong. But it'd be good to have his input because he understands this far better than I do. I don't think we should do a big explanation of one-way speed of light. I don't know if people understand this or not, but you can't measure it because every time it's measured, you're sending a signal out, and it's got to come back to you somehow from somewhere. You either have a signal that's sent to you, like there's no way for you to confirm without having a signal go back. There's no way to confirm that you've got the signal, like that it travels the same way in both directions. Now, most scientists take this and say, well, it's silly to presume that in one direction the signal they've checked it reflected back. Yeah, it's the only and even if you like hook a device up to it and have that send a signal to you to tell you what happened, that has to travel at sea as well. And so that's the return trip. So the reason it's been brought up, and it's a bit of a thought experiment, is that if you don't check, right, if you don't somehow go and check that it's not moving instantaneously, say like I don't know, like let's say when I call Joe, if Joe and I have a chat, he's down in Kentucky, I'm up here in Ontario. It's probably like a solid day's drive down there if I was to hop in my truck and drive down there. But I could call him up on Discord. We could have a chat. We've done that before. It's been a while, but we've done that before. Or we've been streaming together. The time it takes, my browser's lost connection to my camera. Okay, well apparently, but my face isn't important here. So so what I'm saying here is, I'll see if it'll come back. It probably won't. It did. So what's happened here is this has been brought up. It could be going instantaneously. So when I call Joe, maybe I'm instantaneously reaching him, but it takes the speed of light to come back to me, which would change the speed of light. The speed of light coming back to me would have to be 2c. And so the speed of light wouldn't be constant. It wouldn't be c to Joe and c back to me. It would be zero, like zero time to travel the distance to get to Joe, and 2 times c to make it back to me. That's a thought experiment, but you know what? It's not fucking realistic. And then the same thing with this GPS thing. When the signal comes from the GPS to you, they're saying, well, that's one thing. But in order for you to know when the GPS sent the signal, you send a signal to the GPS to tell it you need something, and then you measure how long it takes to come back. That's the problem, is that the GPS is constantly sending a signal out that you can trilaterate yourself or quadrilaterate yourself to find your position, and you can use more and more of them. But yeah, you just don't know. You just don't know for certain that something really weird doesn't happen with the speed of light. The other thing I'd like to point out is that Shane has all these images of Einstein that I think are made to denigrate Einstein as a scientist and a thinker. And so it has trying to sleep with cousin up there and some other bullshit. I think the closest thing we have to that is Peter has a diagram that seems to I don't know why the camera keeps blipping out. There is something wrong with the camera. And I don't know what it is. And it was doing this when I started. It wasn't doing it when I started. Then it did it before I went live, and then it started doing it again. But my mug isn't super important as long as you guys can hear me. And hey, Top, welcome again. I think I said welcome, but welcome, Top. So Shane's now rattled off a bunch of really quickly. He said a bunch of things that are a formula, which is great. It's great. He's working with the math. If is it hooked up to a powered USB? No, my camera's built into the laptop. So it's not that type of situation, Joe. But I guess, yeah, my camera isn't that good. Conversation about 9 hours. In about 9 hours. Oh, okay. Oh, Joe and Mark are going to be on together. Okay, great. Thanks, Spooky, for posting about that. I'll let these guys go again. I really just wanted to point out that Shane rattling off this equation is him trying to say, hey, I know an equation that relates to this. But if he really wanted to have this conversation, he'd have like a whiteboard out instead of these images that are meant to make fun of or denigrate Einstein. He'd be talking about it, which he's not. So I'm pointing that out because what he's saying could be relevant to this conversation. It doesn't seem to be the direction.
Right.
So you have a precise one-way speed of light measurement from GPS to any location on the Earth?
Why do you think a lab frame is location dependent, dude?
Anywhere, dude. Anywhere that you get the GPS signal, yeah.
Okay. So there will be no variance in GPS signal as a function of distance?
No, there's explicitly a timing delay based on your velocity. That's how GPS measures your position accurately without having to make like further adjustments.
And what do you mean by further adjustments?
So if the speed of light was isotropic and constant for someone moving at a constant velocity, the timing difference wouldn't work out for them, right?
So let me walk through this a little bit. So you have a GPS satellite, right? And we don't necessarily know, what it is. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, it's up there somewhere, right? So it's sending a signal down. Your claim is that's going to be a one-way signal, and we can use that to measure the one-way speed of light. What I'm asking you, first of all, I'd like to see the paper to support that. I'm not seeing that yet, so if you could provide that, that'd be great. I'm pretty sure I know which one you're talking about, but I'd love to talk through the details. But what I'm wondering is if you consider that an experiment or not.
I consider it a measurement.
Okay, so it's a measurement. Is it a first order or second order measurement?
First.
It's a first order measurement.
Yep.
So walk me through the difference between a first order and a second order measurement, please.
So a second order measure or a first order measurement is when the thing that you introduce has a directly proportional relationship to the measurement. In the example of Sagnac, for example, when you're measuring light, the exact rotation of the table produces the fringe pattern. So that's a first order effect, velocity, and then the measurement of the corresponding fringe that's directly proportional to the velocity is a first order measurement. Second order measurement.
Directly proportional. That's interesting because to my mind, it seems like there's some adjustments that need to be done in calculations by your own admission. You mentioned velocity of GPS satellites, right? Can you prove that? What do you mean by directly proportional? What do you mean by directly proportional in your definition of first order effect?
Are you for real? Is that a real question?
Yeah, that's a real question. Yeah, just walk me through it, because I need to know that that's not clear as a.
I gave you an example of how velocity would cause a variance.
About it. I'm just trying to clarify
I already clarified it in my original answer.
Well, is it linear or nonlinear? Does that make a difference?
What does proportional mean?
Your first order is more qualitative, second order is more quantitative, right? You get precise and you have measurements and tools using external stuff, right? So let's just get past it. What's your actual point, more to one?
My actual point was, so we've conceded now that this isn't an experiment. It's a measurement.
You said it was a measurement from the first. Who conceded what?
We're on the same page. This is not an experiment.
That's a different way to say the same thing. Sure.
Do you believe that the scientific method doesn't require an experiment?
It does.
Yo, all right. So we're getting a little off into
Yeah, so I'm going to interrupt him here. Peter's getting at something pretty important, which is, some people might say he's being mean, because what he's trying to point out here is that Alan doesn't understand this as well as he purports to do, or Shane even more so. It'll become more and more apparent as we go through this that Shane is less well read on this and sort of copies and manipulates things. He's not a stupid person. Neither of them are stupid people. They're using their intelligence in an incorrect way, and they both have like a cognitive dissonance, I think is the word. So what they're getting at here is like a first order measurement where you like what that means, and second order measurements and stuff like that are. I'm going to say what I think this means, and then I'm probably going to look it up and read it so that we have like a real answer. Because I think that's probably the way to do it. But my understanding of a first order measurement is when you directly measure something and take the measurement yourself, and you're not doing calculations and things like that to figure it out. So second order is when you start using other things to determine your measurements. So in my mind, when I think about this, I'm like, if I go take a tape measure and put it on my basement floor here and determine that the length of my basement, because my house is longer east to west than it is north to south. If I take that dimension and I directly read it and I say, okay, my house is 52 feet long in that direction, and I happen to know I don't think this is true. If it is true, I'll be like super shocked. But I happen to know that my basement is exactly twice as long as it is wide. And I know that maybe I live in a house where I know all the basements are whatever the longest dimension is. The shorter dimension, the width dimension is always exactly one half of it. So I say, okay, well, it's 52 feet long, which means it's 26 feet wide. The 26 feet in my mind is a second order measurement. I haven't directly measured it. I figured out what it is because I know that there's a relationship between the width and the length of basements in my neighborhood. And I live in a custom built house, so that isn't true. But it's an example of what I think it is. But I'm going to look it up because I want to know. I think I can figure that out. First order measurement system. Okay. So there's a way to do this, and you can just first order measurement. And we're gonna figure this out. Now, apparently, it might mean something else. So we're gonna read this so that we know what it is, because this is one of those things where I don't know the answer properly, and I'm wrong. So how do I? There's so many answers on this. I want to find one that's easy to understand. First order lab, you measured for okay. So I want to make okay. First order measurement system. Introduction to first order systems. Okay. Okay, there are two methods to analyze functioning of a control system that are time domain analysis and control domain analysis. In time domain analysis, the response of a system is a function of time. It analyzes the working of a dynamic control system. The analysis can only be applied when nature of input plus mathematical model of the control system is known. It's not easy to express the actual input signals by simple equations, as the input signals of the control systems are not fully known. There are two components of any system's time response: transient response and steady response. Typical and standard test signals are used to judge the behavior of typical test signals. The characteristics of an input signal are constant acceleration, constant velocity, a sudden change, or a sudden shock. We discussed the four types of test signals that are impulse, step, ramp, parabolic, and another important signal is sinusoidal signal. In this article, we'll be discussing first order systems. A system whose input-output equation is a first-order differential equation is called a first-order system. The order of differential equation is usually the highest degree of derivative present in an equation. First-order system contains only one energy-storing element. Usually, a capacitor or a combination of two capacitors is used for this purpose. These cannot be connected to any external energy storage element. Most of the practical models of first-order system with higher order has a dominant first-order mode. It can be considered a first-order system. And then it goes into some stuff here. So that, I mean, that sounds, are those that cannot respond to change in input instantly. Okay, well, see, Joe knows more about this than I do. Look at this. Look right here. First order systems are those that cannot respond to change in input instantly. Well, there you go. Right? This is good, right? Anyway, I think what they're getting at here is that are we figuring things out in a way that Peter and Lucas understand? Or are we getting to a point where maybe Alan and Shane don't understand things as well as they think they do or wish they do? And this Al here, I don't think Alan goes by Al, but I do. So Me, Al Trucker, I don't know everything about this. I've heard this first order, second order type stuff. But I just reading through that, it was a little bit more than it was a little bit more complicated the way they wrote it out than I was looking for a simple answer. And I think I've heard people use first order and second order in a different context, which may be where I got my misapprehension about what it is. Not really sure. But this is a situation where I said what I thought was going on, and I was wrong. But what I've always understood about GPS signals and the like is that you're not getting a constant thing. They can't have first order measurement of light because the emitter can't tell the receiver to measure faster. Okay, then see, yeah, no, you're like, okay, so that makes sense in this context here. And I suspect maybe what I've heard people use these sorts of terminology in different contexts might have changed the way I'm understanding it. And I haven't become the most up-to-date person on relativity. I understand a little bit of it, and I admitted that right off the bat. But you can't have a first order measurement of light because the emitter can't tell the receiver to measure faster than C. And that's the thing is, like, if you want the GPS to send you a signal, you tell the GPS that you want to receive a signal. And I think what Alan and Shane are proposing is that anytime you receive a GPS signal, you're receiving it at C, and you know you're receiving it at C. But how is that a measurement, right? We're sending a signal to say we need to know where we are. Yeah, this is what Joe's saying here. You know, Joe's saying what I'm saying almost simultaneously. He's probably a step ahead of me because there's probably a lag. GPS works by sending a signal to the side and receiving it back to the device and doing the math. And this is called trilateration. It's not triangulation because triangulation is where you calculate angles. This is trilateration where you're calculating your distance from multiple satellites. So you can get more and more precise locations of where you are. And if you think of yourself, if you had, and again, you have to use your imagination because there isn't such a thing as this. But if you imagine yourself standing, I don't know, someplace you like to stand, think of the nicest place you like to be, and you're holding a thing that looks like a phone. Maybe it is your phone has a GPS receiver in it, or you're just holding a GPS unit in your hand. And think of a string going up into space in two satellites and one receiver. So you figure out how far away you are. So this lateration thing is, think of like this thing measuring the string that goes from your device to each one of the satellites. And the more satellites you pick up, the more precise your location will be. Because with more measurements, you can just make it more and more precise. But yeah, if you have two satellites, it can tell where, and like it just works it out. When you get to a third and fourth and fifth satellite, it gets even better. And these satellites are strategically placed all around the globe, and they originally put there for military use, but they work really well for lots of things. Yeah, land-based equipment would be different for sure, Joe. And then I've heard somebody say something really dumb the other day, which is, how do we know? Somebody wrote this somewhere. It's like, how do we know where true north is? Well, we went and found out. And they said, like, how would an interferometer or a gyroscope know where true north is? And the answer is quite simply, you need to calibrate it, right? You can't just building a gyroscope and just setting it to work does not make the gyroscope find, especially an interferometric gyroscope. There's nothing about that knows where north is. But you can figure it out and calibrate it and say, okay, this is what you're now measuring. But it does measure where you're going. They're organized in a way that most places in the world you can always hit multiple sats and get janky. Yeah, so this is true, and so, and this is great, Joe. Thanks for pointing this out. So yeah, there are there are places on Earth where so few people are traveling that the amount of money it costs to have satellites in the sky up in the space is expensive. So having lots of them there is expensive and unnecessary. And so it's not so great. But and this is something like some flat earthers say GPSs don't exist. Alan and Shane say they exist. I don't know what they think they do or how they work on a stationary Earth, but it's kind of weird. But I guess they have some sort of a way to and maybe they're not even full flat earthers, right? Light is an electromagnetic wave. It sure is. It sure is, Joe. So I'm gonna play some more of this. I don't know what they're gonna say next. But yeah, let's sort of hear what they're going at.
We're getting a little
No,
off into
we're
the
not. We're
weeds
not. We're
here
not.
with
We're not.
dog
We're
shit.
not. I think this is important.
Okay, go ahead, continue.
So I just want to understand because, and the reason for this is I have a definition of the scientific method from your website and your epistemology of science. And according to your scientific method as recorded on your website, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact link, but I can provide it to you. You come from a framework of realism, objective world exists outside the mind. That's great. Scientific method, and specifically mentioning an experiment. So there's no experiment that has measured the one-way speed of light, is there?
Well, there was the resonance cavity experiment done in 2019, where they said that they, measured the isotropy of the speed of light, but the things that they accounted for to get the measurement for C to equal C, they accounted for sidereal effects in seasonal effects, i.e. the things that Miller found when he measured the periodicity relative to the position of the sun and the stars throughout the year.
But this is another measurement. This isn't another experiment, is it? What's the independent variable?
Not sure. I have to go look at that one again. I just know they used a resonant cavity to make their measurement.
Yeah, but I mean,
they're just projecting it outward.
You would agree, right? That
Okay. So you want to get to experiments then? Let's go over all interferometry. Okay.
Okay, but before we get there, I just want to
stop. No. The independent variable is the.
Okay, just chill. It's cool.
Good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, let's not spiral, guys. Let's not spiral.
So the independent variables are the direction of the device and the measurements taken throughout the day. If your hypothesis is that throughout the day you'll be aligned with certain directions of motion, that you'll be able to measure those. That's why you move the spectrum.
So
okay, so sometimes nope. I don't know what Joe's saying nope to. I went over to that. Hopefully that came through okay. There's another problem with measuring one-way light. Well, Joe, you can come here and talk with me too if you want, Joe. I don't know if you're in a position to do that. Because you probably have some great input to have. Did I post the link? I don't even know if I did. And I don't know if Joe has time or inclination to come here. Yeah, it's up there. It's up there, Joe. If you want to come in, Joe, come on in. If you want to talk one-way speed of light, I'm happy to get into it. But they're talking about this resonant cavity thing. Okay, here we go. I'm posting it in the chat here. Paste. Here we go. I posted it in the chat because if I see you, Joe, I'm gonna let you in. How's that sound? This whole thing they're getting into is it's interesting that there's this experiment that they're talking about, and basically what they're saying is something that most scientists seem to agree we haven't been able to figure out a good way to measure the one-way speed of light. And they're saying, well, it was done in 19. Is it 1919? I'm not sure. Joe, are you there?
Yeah, what's up, Al?
Yeah, well, I'm awake. I think what's up is we're here having a chat. I spent some time talking about this aether cosmology versus relativity conversation that was had, I think maybe like a week ago or so. I can't remember. It wasn't even a full week ago. I think it was like Thursday last week, and I think on Friday I started reviewing their introductions, and now they're starting to get into their back and forth conversation on Jeranism. Or he calls it Debatism X, I think, his when he does these debates, which he hosts, and he's pretty reasonable, I think, as a moderator. I got a lot of problems with Jaron and other things, but he's He's a flat earther.
No
He's one of the
doubt.
guys that's gonna go. What's that?
No doubt. I'm familiar with
No-
Jaron.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, you've run into him. Yeah, I think a lot of people have. I think that's why people come and watch. Hey, PC, good to see you. So yeah, so Joe, what do you think about this resonant cavity experiment? Should we look into what this is, or should we just let them talk about it?
Let him go ahead and talk about it. He seems to know what he's talking about. He's probably got a better detailed version of it than anything I would know.
Well, I think Peter and Lucas will probably be familiar with this because they spend a lot more time dissecting these. So I'll go back and hit the play button here.
Is time of day something that can be manipulated?
No.
So
But
then
the
it's
direction.
a variable.
Well,
Is it?
well, in conjunction with the orientation of the device, it is.
In conjunction with the orientation of the device, you can adjust your time of day. Explain that to me.
Yeah. So when the device is orientated north-south, right, at a specific time of day, you'll turn it in a circle, and the measurements will differ as you turn it.
Okay. So you're saying now that there's a time of day that I can't manipulate, and that's sort of like a shadow variable, and there's a direction of device that you're saying I can manipulate. Is the direction of the device relative to an absolute lab frame, and how would that be determined based on latitude?
The device is on Earth, so it's in the absolute lab frame. And secondarily, when you turn the device, that will show you if the variance is corresponded to the time of day and the direction that it's orientated with. Now,
Can I say something, Al?
Yeah, yeah.
The hypothesis.
Go ahead, Joe.
Is he supposed to be talking about a resonant cavity right now? Because
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Works.
Is it's Yeah, I haven't looked into this specific experiment, this resonant cavity one.
So if we're talking about the one-way direction of the speed of light, it only a resonant cavity works by bouncing it off the sides of it. That's how it works. So you're not getting.
It's not one way.
Yeah.
It's still a reflection.
Yeah.
It's still a reflection.
In fact, it's multiple reflections. So I mean, it checks it over and over and over. It's.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about the particular experiment he's talking about, but I know that's not how a resonant cavity works. I mean, resonance is that's.
Yeah, no, resonance is usually well, I guess that when we think about resonance, when we talk about like sound waves, we think of like where a sound wave hits something that is tuned to that frequency, calibrated to that frequency, where when a wave at that frequency hits it, it starts to go because it wants to be at that frequency. And with sound waves, we usually study about like a guitar's resonance chamber where it has that curved shape, so that there's a column of air of that right length to take that and make it louder. But I think we all know, like if you have an electric guitar and you pluck the string, the sound is way less strong, but there's still a sound made. It just doesn't project as well because an acoustic guitar has that resonance chamber. The pickups on an electric guitar change it into a digital signal and play it over electric.
Well, you're not going to do that with light because
no,
the resonance, it can't resonate at the speed of light.
no, and that's the thing is, like, if you like all the things that people come up with to measure the one-way speed of light have a problem in them. And I've come up with a concept for a device where you measure the one-way speed by having a very, very short length between a start and an end of a measurement device, and so you measure it over such a short distance with a device that's really, really accurate and really precise to a very small length of distance to tell you how long it takes to cross that distance. And the entry into the device of the light starts the timer, the exit ends the timer, and the distance is so short that there's a negligible or near zero amount of time between the entry and the exit, so that you can negate it and get the idea that light does travel in one direction at that speed, and then you work out there would be an error margin, but it would be very small.
Can I tell you what I think the problem is with that?
Yeah, let me know.
So the timer that you are triggering to measure that, you still can't trigger that timer instantaneously. It has to send the message to the timer at C. So your answer is always going to come back as C when you do that.
Because you're saying because the timer was turned on by the entry of the beam into the measurement device.
Right. So
Because that
the
happens simultaneously in my
timer
device.
can only be activated at C. Nothing can move faster. You would have to have
and that's
something
right.
that can.
And I'm just saying it's because the beam of light itself is activating it on its way in and on its way out.
But the activation of it would have to be faster than C.
No,
in order to measure C.
It'd be instantaneous.
Well, you can't do that though, because you
I know
have to send a signal.
It doesn't exist. I'm hypothesizing a non-existent device.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This isn't the device. This isn't something that exists. This is something where I imagine this device being exceedingly small. I'm thinking that the length that the beam of light would travel would be the Planck length, and I'm postulating that it would be a device so well tuned that a photon hitting it turns it on, and when the beam of light leaves, it turns it off. So it's light activated, and it only runs for the amount of time that the light's in there. And then, so by knowing that it travels the Planck length in however long it's on for, it then allows you to come back and say, well, it took X number of seconds, and it would be a very small fraction of a second to travel the Planck length. And so we therefore know that the one-way speed, because we only sent the beam in one direction, we therefore know that the one-way speed of light is this, minus the error device over the length, which is the Planck length.
So the and I'm sure you're aware of this, but depending on the frame of reference, the light itself it is instantaneous, right? From the perspective of the photon that's moving, it's emitted.
The light would experience it instantaneously, but the measurement device wouldn't. The measurement device there would be a very small fraction of time from the entry and exit point across this Planck length device.
Right, but what I'm getting at with that is that because that is how we know that that's the speed limit, because of that, right? Well, in order to measure the speed of something, it can't be at its limit, right? You can't measure the speed of light of something that can't make measurements faster than the speed of light. It's always going to top out at C.
Yeah.
So whenever we reflect it back, it's because it's half the time for us to send the signal that it's been emitted that it is for it to return. It doesn't actually have a whole lot to do with the light return. We're not actually measuring the speed of the light. We're measuring the speed of the measuring device that captures the light.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always going to be C.
Yeah, it is. You know what? The argument they're making is silly on both points. But
Yes.
Lucas and Peter are pointing out that Alan and Shane are not as smart as they think they are. And probably not as smart as I think of. So the Planck length, this is the quantum of time, the smallest measurement of time that has any meaning. So yeah, so it's the time and the size of at Planck time, and the Planck length. We have a very small thing that is a very small amount of time, and it's super, super small.
Now, famously, the Planck length, though, is used to describe the expansion of the universe during the very first seconds of the Big Bang, right? That's what we
exactly. Yeah, and that's why I talk about it, because it's like the smallest thing we can think of, and by having it really small, my thought is, if it's really, really small, because we usually do light measurements at really long distances, and therefore there's a return time to get the signal, right? And so what I'm saying is by making it such a short distance we measure it over, we then almost negate. There's still the return of the on and the off of the thing, actually has a problem, but it's such a short amount of time that compared to the amount of time it takes light to travel across it, the distance, like, we don't have that problem where we're sending light over a kilometer and bouncing it back, and then
Yeah.
and then averaging out the each trip. We're measuring it in one direction, and what we get back from the device is such a short distance that we can negate that distance and know that it was in one way, it was we got the right measurement. Because
I think you would
we're
have
not
to.
waiting for the signal to come back to us from so far away.
You would have to measure on some kind of quantum level to do that, and when you do that, of course, there's a problem with the wave function collapsing of.
Well, yeah, but I mean, come on, Joe. When I'm using an imaginary instrument, I'm already gonna have figured that out.
Well, I'm just saying, if you've got a universal speed limit, you're going to have a problem measuring anything over that speed limit. So it's always going to be c. It can only be as fast as the slowest measuring, or like, for example, mine and your internet connection that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
I can have the best computer in the world, but if your computer is only capable of 56K, we're never going to talk faster than 56K.
Yeah, we have the slowest thing, the weakest link in the chain.
Right, the lowest common denominator, essentially.
Yeah, this is what we can work with. I wanted to post up what PC said here because it made me think of like a way to
that's
denigrate
perfect.
people. And so your measurement is only as good as your measuring tool. That's true. And going off the deep end. Oh, that's my essay, right? PC, you're talking about being kind, and I was just about to say something denigrating. I was gonna say what we're looking for here is the tool that I've come up with to measure the travel of light over the Planck length is something that's inversely proportional to 45's ego. Was that unkind?
I get a feeling that the Planck length, though, is related to C, and
it might
well,
be. It might be. We shouldn't get into my hypothetical device
okay.
as much as this debate, because I've still got some work to do on this, definitely. But yeah, please go read my essay, and take it to heart, and be kind to people, even former presidents who aren't kind. Go spread kindness, and if you have the opportunity to vote for kindness, try that. That's my political rant of the day. I'm not really a political commentator, but things align here in a funny way. Anyway, I think Crystal thinks I'm being a little bit funny, and she's what is this? Is this an angel? I don't believe in angels, but it could be an angel. I also love, I think I pointed this out before, I love Crystal's new grinning, smiling face. But yeah, vote for kindness. Vote for looking after your fellow people. And as I ranted on Sumami's post earlier, I can't remember what I said. I said a whole bunch of shit. I was not kind to certain people in that post. But really, what I'm trying to say is, if people are unkind.
So the Planck second is actually used to calculate the speed of light. That's what I thought.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's good that I also use it to calculate. That I use it to calculate the one-way speed. I'm going to work this out
5.39 times 10 to the negative 44th.
Yeah, to negative 44. That's kind of a small number. Kind of a small number, but let's run some more debate and see what these guys come up with. It'll be interesting.
This was that, based on the orientation throughout the day in Earth's direction of motion, where it'll be aligned and not aligned with it, it'll get the minimum and maximum readings. So you do that by turning the device with respect to the time of day to get the minimum and maximum readings to find out if the time of day is truly affecting the measurements, which is what all interferometry experiments did at that time.
Earth's direction of motion? Did you just mention that?
Didn't you say in
Yes.
your opener that you guys adopted the ether cosmology, like the ether framework, and that actually you said that there was a measurement of ether wind speed and that it did vary at the same latitude and altitude? Was that not in your opener?
No,
We didn't talk about wind speed.
Let me answer that question. That's a great question, Shane. Thank you. Would you like me to pull up the paper related that explains Dayton Miller within the context of the quadratic Sagnac effect, that describes why it's not an etheric wind? Or we
have
can
you
talk
explain
about yeah, absolutely. So you're aware, correct, that there's something called the international gravity formula? Can you describe the two terms of that formula?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, great. So
Wow.
the international gravity formula describes the relationship of the gravitational potential as measured by local and its effect on local G. There are two terms. There's a potential term related to the oblateness of the Earth, and then there is a second term related to the rotation of the Earth. So basically, all the quadratic Sagnac effect is saying is, in the same way of all interferometry, we make a measurement of the effect on the device within that frame from those two effects. So that creates what's called a quadratic effect, and all that really is just saying is it's a perfectly consistent relativistic explanation of Dayton Miller. So there's no concession of ether wind. I want to get to the ether wind topic though. So
Okay, so before these guys get into the aether wind, Joe, do you have anything you want to say about what they just went through there?
I do have something to say because it's actually our conversation about your Planck device that relates to this.
Okay, go ahead.
So we've confirmed Big C by using Planck lengths, because the Planck length is 1.616. We'll stop there. Times 10 to the negative 35th meters. But whenever you take light and apply it to that, it comes out to 299 million meters per second. Exactly what the speed of light is. So you can mathematically prove that that's the speed limit also, because it's the smallest measurement that a quantum particle can move in a period of time. So even light is bound by moving through space, because space and time are tied together. So you still can't go faster than that. It's still got to be that constant in a vacuum.
There's still the speed limit, and until we get into sci-fi type conversations, which it's not necessarily the case that we'll never figure out a way to move differently than that, but it would involve a huge shift in our thinking that right now is really just imagination and science fiction type stuff.
We know from experimentation that the speed that the emitter is moving doesn't affect the speed of light that it emits, right?
That's right. Like C is a universal. It's the speed limit of the universe, I think, is one of the ways people put it, and that is true. And the Planck length is sort of a limit going downwards in size. So mathematically, as a mathematician, you can't get smaller. You could still have half a Planck length and a quarter and an eighth, and keep on going and keep on dividing it down. There's no question you could do that mathematically, but testing shows you can't actually get smaller than that, and
space
accomplish
itself,
anything.
Space itself is the only thing that can violate that number.
Because it expands faster than C, like the actual size of the universe.
Because once again, your measuring tool, which is within space, has to be able to go faster than that in order to measure that. That's the only, which essentially your device would have to, and this is all related, of course, because the speed of light, but so any device that measured the one-way speed of light would have to be based on space expanding that fast, and in that case you're not going to be able to make a direct observation. You're still going to have to look at the Yeah, yeah. Ether's nonsense. We've proved ether
it is.
wrong beyond any reasonable doubt.
And it's not nonsense in that it made sense at the turn of the last century. Like back
Sure.
in the century I was born in the early quarter of it, a lot of work was being done to
Well,
check
it's intuitive.
It made sense, but it didn't. It turned out to be wrong.
It's intuitive because we live here on Earth, and we, even though like you would say, well, there's nothing here in front of me. There's all kinds of air, which is a thing. So we imagine that outside of Earth, that space, there's still some medium. It's just not oxygen, right? But
Exactly. Yeah. There's still we the nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and other things that are in the atmosphere that we live in is there. We can test it, and we can actually not only can we test it, we can pull it out of the atmosphere, divide it up, and do tests on it and see what it is that we have.
what
There's
do
a
we
lot of
find
different
in
ways to do that, and we also can test that there's no aether in between matter up above us. Once you get out of the atmosphere, we can test it. There's no such thing,
right?
and
Well,
it's interesting that these guys are holding on to this, but they're holding on to it for a reason I don't fully understand.
Yeah. Well, I think you talked about talking to Dr. Tapp because, again, I'm not a physicist.
Yeah, no, he's super. He's a super physicist, but he's extremely well read on.
Well, he works with lasers a
quantum
lot, doesn't
physics,
he?
because he works. Sorry, what's that?
He works with lasers in his job, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. So,
Yeah,
and he
that's your
told me
guy.
that I understand it well enough to explain it, so I can say that what he does is he uses Weasel Cult. I need people to get my subs up just so that I can have more. We need more Weasel emoticons in more places, and I would definitely put some in there. And I'm gonna do a 100 sub special for people at some point. I think I got to be a little bit better, and I got to pick a good time to do it. Hey Bree, welcome. He just puts them on the shark's head. Yeah. So what he does is he takes lasers at a particular frequency, and he hits strontium atoms with them from multiple directions until he gets them to stop moving at. He gets them to stop vibrating to the point that they're at near 0 degrees Kelvin. Sorry, not degrees,
Right.
just 0 Kelvin. I keep adding degrees in there. I don't know why. So at 0 Kelvin, what that means is it's not just that there's no heat, but it means there's no vibration. There's no things stop
Right.
moving at that temperature. And
Absolute zero doesn't refer to heat; it refers to the movement of the
movement
particles.
of matter. Yeah, the movement of the particles.
Yeah.
And so it's a resonance thing again, not related to this, but when resonance happens, if you hit these things with the right resonant frequency from these lasers, they actually stop moving almost entirely, not quite entirely, but they're so close to zero movement. And I believe he said it's like 1/1000th of a Kelvin is the temperature they get them to, and they can't really get a whole lot better than that. And the experiments they're able to do, once they stop them from moving on their own due to the vibration they have from being at, like, say, room temperature or any other temperature between 0 and whatever temperature we live at, and even higher temperatures, they're able to find out a lot about these
Does he do
atoms
this
and
deep underground?
No, this particular thing isn't deep underground. There's other experiments that are like that. I think he might be in a basement, but it's not like he goes in an elevator that takes him to like the bottom of a mine shaft. It's not that type of thing. There are ones that are done that way. Yeah, no, this one isn't. They do that.
I'm curious if he gets interference from like radiation from space.
That I don't know, but they do these things in a special chamber, and I've seen. I don't know if I'm allowed to see it, so I don't want to like spread this around. But I've seen pictures of the chamber he does it in.
Yeah,
I don't think the work, like, it's not like he's working for top secret military base, so like I think it's fairly well shared. And PC saying strontium is beautiful. I think I remember looking at it. It is sort of a neat element. Yeah, so I mean, and it would be great to get Vandy to come here and talk to us about what he does again. And I do have a video called "Chill a Tom" from Thanksgiving, where he actually went through this and told us what the numbers were and stuff. And I know if PC's still here, I know she'd probably find that for me. It's from almost a year ago, I think, because I'm pretty sure it was last Thanksgiving. I just can't remember if it was American or Canadian Thanksgiving we did it at, but we did it for a Thanksgiving show we did together, which was great. And he was very kind to offer his time and explain what he does. Because what I actually said to him is like, I think most people like me might think a laser would heat things up rather than cooling them down. He's like, oh, that's really cool what we do. We should. And so I talked him into explaining it because, a laser has energy and it takes it. So when you put energy into something, you think of that as adding energy to a system. And because of this resonance factor, it takes it away. It was just really neat.
Photons can push things, so
they can,
if you push it the same from every direction, it should stay still, right?
That's essentially what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it only works at certain frequencies.
Right.
So they have to hit the right frequency to make that happen. Which is kind of a neat aspect of it as well.
Neat.
So yeah, no, and his his real work in science is far more interesting than Alan and Shane. But Alan and Shane's adherence to this is interesting, and I think we're gonna get into some other small things here, which is interesting. So I'm gonna run this again, unless you have anything else you want to pop in there, Joe. I don't want to.
Well, no, I just said that stuff because I feel like this guy. He's like when he's talking about these quadratics, he's just flexing on him now. He's not really.
Oh, he certainly is, and the reason is mostly to point out that these guys know some loud word or big words, but they don't understand what they're saying necessarily.
You mentioned that there's an absolute frame. So the Earth itself is an absolute frame, correct? The entire Earth.
I'm not going to keep answering the same question over and over
we
again.
explained it.
Okay, so yes, that's the case.
That's what I got.
Okay, so would there be any isotropy in the measurement of the one-way speed of light as a function of your location on the Earth?
Only in the north-south direction.
In the north-south direction. How do you measure that direction?
With GPS.
So you're reifying your model by using GPS to put in second-order calculations to inform something that's not an experiment. Okay.
How are we reifying the opposite model when we're using experiment and tools and measurements?
I would like to show that.
You haven't provided.
Not what that word means, dude.
Could I? Maybe we can reset this. Maybe you can get back to the sea lion because there was a statement made.
Okay, I heard you laughing. Title of the video, PC. It was something like "We Chill a Tom," which was meant to be a pun about Adam and a male turkey, which is a Tom is what you call a male turkey. And I just I'm not good enough at using my computer to figure that out. But it was one we did. We probably streamed it live, so it might be in the live selection. And thanks PC for looking for it. Because yeah, I don't know how to look for it, and I'll let these guys go again. But Joe, I heard you laughing, and this reification argument it's kind of dumb, but because we're dealing with flat earthers, they say it all the time. They say it all the time, and they are kind of saying, I don't think they're saying they measured everything with a GPS, but the fact these guys are going to GPS satellite measurements when they're saying that the Earth is still and the space doesn't exist and that there's this aether and stuff is kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see where they're going with this.
What does north to south directions look like for them?
Well, yeah, it's interesting to see. Like they were like, well, we use a GPS. It's like, how did the GPS find out what north to south is? And so I was laughing at somebody who's like, well, how does a laser interferometer know what north and south is? It's like you would have to
use a third party.
You wouldn't just you don't just turn it on and it tells you where north and south is. but there are ways to find out where north and south are, and you wouldn't use magnetic compasses to figure that out. But there are ways to figure out exactly where things are, and for latitude in particular, Foucault's pendulum works very well to tell you your latitude on Earth, because of the Coriolis effect, which also tells you that we're moving, because that drift is a function of.
Have you ever seen one of those set up?
I have not in person. I don't remember ever seeing one in person. I've been to the types of museums that might have them, so maybe I have and just don't remember. But I've seen many of them shown in videos. And there's a guy in my country, but on the other side of the country in BC, who did a really good one, and that is called The Gentleman Physicist. Sorry, The Gentleman Physicist has a great video on a Foucault's pendulum. And Foucault's sign law.
A clock out of it.
Yeah, you really, that would be really cool. And then so
we'll talk about that later.
PC, are you? I just so that I know, was that the post of my video with Dr. Tap, or was that the Gentleman Physicist? Because I just see gibberish after the YouTube live. I suspect that might be my live show with. You found it, okay? Thanks, Crystal. That's awesome. Yeah, so if anybody missed that video, it was kind of a fun time. We had a good conversation. Yeah, Tom, yeah, and I don't know if people always get my weird use of language, but I try to throw some stuff in there. I kind of play with words because it's something I like doing, and some people think I'm good at it, and those that don't probably don't show up. Yeah, Dr. Tap's channel, I think Dr. Tap doesn't have anything on his channel, but he does have, I think, links to things he's on. So if he's on, like, doing an interview, and there was actually, because we talked about Planck length and stuff, I will point out that Vandy did a series of videos with the other Vandy, Vandalia?
Yeah.
Did like a series of videos where he had a bunch of sign. Oh, that's the one with Dr. Tap. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Crystal. Okay, I'm not having any luck figuring this out.
Can I point out something though? Because this argument this thing has turned into this whole big inflated argument about things, and none of this is really necessary, because you know how we know that C is constant without any of this? Because it works.
It works. It works every time we use it to measure something. Yeah.
We measure things to extreme precision because C is constant, and it works every time, and ends up, you can check it multiple ways, and it always works down to Planck lengths, right? Which is the smallest unit of measurement you can have.
It absolutely does. And I just did this. Dr. Tap, I know you weren't here right at the beginning, Joe, but at the beginning I was like, Dr. Tap took some of his time this weekend. We were having a chat, and I said, hey, I'm doing this math. And we were using equals MC squared, and he helped walk me through to make sure I did the math correctly and I understood what I was doing and how to use the calculator and punch things in so that I got the right answer and not forget steps. And we worked out how much energy there is in a single helium atom, which becomes deuterium. I can't remember how to pronounce it. But we worked it out because I was doing a Brilliant question from that Brilliant app, and I was like, I think I know what I should do here, but I'm having trouble getting the numbers to work out. And he helped me understand that they were asking me in another part of it to change the units and do a unit conversion as well as the other math. And after walking me through it and telling me what I was doing in the right way, it worked out. And equals MC squared worked on the atomic scale, and it works at larger distances. And the things we observe and work with in science are they're not just tossed out there as like, I think this might be what's going on. First you have, I think this is what might be going on, and then it's tested over and over again. And then you're like, yes, now this all agrees. All of these things agree with each other. And so we're now willing to call this a theory, which is a word that's misused all the time. And I do it too.
So right now we're looking like the thing that science wants, which I don't think they're ever going to get, but maybe, is a unified field theory, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's something everybody wants to see or thinks we could potentially
one of
get.
the few things that is unified that works both on the quantum level and the cosmic level is the constant of C. It works in both of those situations. The
Oh, you clipped out for a second, Joe, but I think I got that. 1 million subscribers. Oh yeah.
am I too loud?
No, you're good. I don't think it clipped because of your mic. I think it might have been I think that might have been I think that might have been just like an internet blip, but I'm not sure. I'm looking to see. I have full signals and things, and I'm on fiber internet, so I don't have like weather issues. Oh, this is a beautiful day here, actually.
So the constant of C is something that works on both the quantum level and the cosmic level.
Yeah.
In every situation that we try it. And the fact that we don't have a unified field theory speaks to how unusual that is and how precise of measurement it is, because it works in both those cases where nothing else hardly does.
Yeah, other things just break down at these levels, and the fact that these things break down mathematically is going to lead me into what I think is about to be said, because I watched this debate. Most of it, I watched most of it straight through, and I got bored of it, and then I came back and rewatched some of it, and then I was like, I fucking hate the way this thing was done on the one hand, and I want to push back against it, but I also thought Lucas and Peter generally did a really good job. Although I know Lucas said he thought he lost his cool a couple of times and was upset with himself for doing that, because he's on the Globe Gangsters Discord page, which I don't know if you need an invite to get there. But
so is this are they flat earthers?
So the Globe Gangsters are not. So this guy on the screen is not a flat earther, and the other guy with the shorter beard, who's labeled as Lucas, neither of them are on the
but
flat
are the
earth
other
side.
two are the ether guys
The
flat
other
earthers?
two, the aether guys, yeah, they seem to be into the flat earth. Yes.
Well, what the fuck? This doesn't work. None of this works on the flat earth anyway.
No, like that's why I'm like, the GPS thing is ridiculous. Now they also are sort of geocentrist as well. So, and this Shane St. Pierre, I don't know if you ever watch Red's Rhetoric, Joe?
Oh yeah, Reds is
So
one of my favorite channels.
Reds just did a video on this Shane guy about how he used globe measurements to prove a flat Earth by playing with the numbers a little bit. The guy knows how to use a spreadsheet, I guess. So like, that's why I find this so funny, is like geocentrism. I mean, I guess some of this stuff might work for geocentrism. But the reason they're using the aether is because, like, it's the aether that's moving around us. We're not moving around in space. The aether moves around us, and that's why we think sometimes we're moving, but we're not. Like, I think that's where they're going with this. That's the only thing I can make sense of, because the aether's been disproven. It was a great hypothesis based on what we knew 150 years ago, and then by like a little over 100 years ago, it was like, yeah, that ain't right. That's not where this is going.
Do you know what the consequences of an ether would be on our atmosphere on a spinning globe? Like
I do.
Because you're talking about having all that mass there rubbing against the atmosphere.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to keep your hat on when you're like on a speedboat, Joe?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and this is, I mean, I think we hear flat earthers say this, and maybe I should bring up that other talking point, which neither, I'm not saying Alan or Shane have this talking point, but this is the talking point they come up with, is we're moving at like 33,000 meters per second or whatever at the equator. Like, they're like, we would all fly off the globe because, and they're thinking of driving down the road in a convertible at 100 miles an hour, right? And they're like, why aren't we blowing off the globe? Because we're like traveling through space so fucking fast, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason and this is, they also deny a lot of other shit, and there's a lot of nuh-uh in there, and I'm gonna bring up the other thing they add to nuh-uh in a second, because I think they're gonna start talking about it. The reason the atmosphere doesn't blow off the globe is because we're moving through a vacuum, and gravity is strong enough to hold the atmosphere to the Earth, and the gradation in the density of the atmosphere as you go up in elevation is proof enough for that.
Right.
There's no reason to doubt gravity, and there's no reason to doubt that the atmosphere sticks to the ball, as they say.
Well, that's
And the water
the thing.
too.
You can, if you take gravity away, you can fudge the numbers enough to make a good argument for a flat Earth. But when you add the physics of our universe, which gravity is one of the fundamental parts, well, it's not been called fundamental yet, but it seems to be.
No, but it's one of those things that gets into semantics and pedantic conversations, and I don't think that does these conversations you and I are having any good. But the precision of how we use words and what we name things at the level of science is important. So
right. Well, even just think about the path of least resistance. So if you're pulling because of a mass, if you're pulling to the center of that mass from all directions, what shape are you going to make?
I mean, it's going to be basically round if you can get it even. I mean, these are and if you're pushing it all in, it doesn't matter which way you're doing it. Whether you're pulling it in or out, you're going to end up, if you pull equally in all directions, you're going to end up with a
zero,
a sphere. And that's we see spheres everywhere. We see spherical and oblate spherical shapes everywhere. Hey, Dave, welcome. So the thing that they're going to bring up here, I'm pretty sure, if it's not here, it's soon in this conversation, is kinematic equivalence.
Okay.
Now, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not super great on kinematics. I'm working on it. I've done one module. I got to go back and redo it. I felt like I sort of skidded through it and didn't do great. But basically what it seems to be is where you can relate two things to each other mathematically. Like it works one way, it works the other. And they use that the way you can draw these things together as like, well, that's why the scientists have been using that to screw it up this way, and we're just going to bring it back. And people like Austin Whitsitt just say this kinematic equivalence is a perfect this and a perfect that. And then you get somebody that knows their way around a calculator and the things that he's talking about, and they work it all out, and they're like, no, it fucking doesn't. And I'm deferring to them because I'm not the expert. I'm not the subject matter expert. And Joe, if you are, please step in and tell me what I got right or wrong. And a bit kinematic, and this idea is a kinematic equivalence is the word.
I know what kinematics are, but it's only 4 equations. I say it's only 4 equations like it's easy.
Well, the thing is, but it doesn't because you can do math and get two things that are similar or that where the numbers are the same does not mean that you have made one thing into the other in reality. And I guess maybe the best example would be if I have say where I work driving trucks, I've got 4 trucks and 4 trailers, and so I have 8 vehicles there. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then let's say we'll use Dr. Tapp's workplace, and say he's got 4 lasers and 4 chambers. So he has 8 devices there. Therefore, atomic physics and trucking are the same thing.
Right, exactly. It's the
math is the same, but the reality of what we're talking about isn't. And so when Austin, who's not in this debate, and it's not relevant, but he's just the one that uses this kinematic argument the most, or the person I've heard say it the most. When he says that, he's like, electromagnetism and gravity are the exact same thing, because in this one instance, I can make the numbers very similar.
So we talked about deuterium earlier, right?
Yes.
Is the weight of deuterium any different than the original element?
I believe it. I believe it is, because you add a
electron, right?
Is it an electron or a neutron?
Oh no, you're adding a proton. My bad.
You're adding a proton. Or the neutron. I can't remember which, but
well,
is it a neutron? I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember, and I just worked.
No,
with
it's a proton. It's
it's
adding
proton. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So so it's extra proton, and the proton is the weighty item, right? The electrons are not the weighty item.
The nucleus is the only thing that has weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, electron has a mass. It's just a very small mass.
Does it?
Yeah. They're not massless. They're just they're so light they may as well be. Their mass is ignored, but they're not. They do not have zero mass.
Oh, I thought they moved at the speed of light.
Yeah, but that so like but if you stop them, they I can't remember how that works. And
They
the same
have
thing with
energy.
protons.
They don't have mass.
Yeah, and but it's I can't remember how it works. I've got to look this up.
No,
I was reading about this like a week ago.
You can play the video and I'll look it up.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, that's great. I'll start playing this and we'll hear what these guys have to say. And this is Peter, who hasn't talked as much. He's the other guy that's on the side of relativity.
Made earlier by Alan, I believe, that there are all these questions about the measurement of the velocity of light, and therefore this whole thing about rotating the ether and time dilation and length contraction are just made up because we don't measure that thing. Well, I would like to go back to what I presented earlier and show a measurement, and this has been done many times but by many people. Here's a measurement. And here are some of the values. I'm going to highlight them on the screen for the audience that are being measured, okay? You guys can see, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the measured velocity of a muon. Muon is not light. Muon has mass. It's a particle. It's well studied in laboratory settings. We know its mass. And we can measure its velocity when it comes from the atmosphere at high speed, 0.98 of c, not c, just shy of c. We can measure it. We can measure the momentum. Momentum is mass times velocity. We know the mass from other measurements. We certainly know the distance, 10 kilometers. That's easily measured. And we count the number of muons over here and over here. So that's a measure. And now the math simply does not add up. And we also know the half-life of a muon, very well studied. The math half-life basically means the particle will disappear after a certain amount of time. So we know that this math does not add up if this was an absolute reference frame. There is no way this many muons can cover 10 kilometers in the amount of time that they can be alive. We perform measurements of these things, we add them up, and there is no way. We know, however, when we look at it through the lens of rotating the ether, that time dilation and length contraction perfectly explain this observable, empirically observable and measurable phenomenon. It is shown here. From the point of view of the Earth, there's time dilation occurring when we look at muons. Their clocks seem to be running slower. When we think about it from the position of muon, it's the distance between the two positions that is shortening. These are
okay.
Yes.
So hey, Tori's here. Welcome. We're both correct. A stationary electron has mass. Yeah, and I think photons are the same. Joe, I think there's photons also, which we never see not in motion, but if we stop them, they develop a mass as well. I believe. And photons are emitted from electrons changing location too, I believe, if I remember correctly how that works. So it's all very like matter and energy are sort of intrinsically connected, and they can change from one stores the other, and the other one can go and add to the other. It's a very interesting. To me, it's a very interesting thing that I'd like to study a whole lot more about, which is why I want to, and maybe at some point, if I become more financially solid in the future, which certainly isn't now. Well, I'm not doing well financially because I'm not working because I'm sick. But when I get back at it, maybe I'll be able to start going back to school at some point. So, and I want to study stuff like this and learn about it properly. I stopped the video because this muon thing is really interesting, and what's sort of coincidental but also really cool is in the Brilliant app, I'm about to start doing a small module on muons, and so I'm really interested to do this, and I'm going to spend some time doing that later later today if I have a few minutes to just sort of.
So are you
think.
going to school for physics?
No, I'm not. My study of physics ended in the mid '90s when I was in high school, and when I graduated, I had taken what we call here grade 13 or OAC physics, which is it's something they got rid of, and now it was meant to be sort of a bridge to university. I ended up going to construction. I learned a lot more about physics from an engineering standpoint in terms of like a lot about how buildings and things like that works and all the systems in them. And I've also learned quite a bit about vehicles and their physics. But I'm not when it gets into relativity and stuff like that. The last time I studied it was so long ago. The information isn't still right. Hey, Commander, good to see you. So I'm not well trained in science, but I'm very interested in science, and I watch a lot of science content. I read a lot of science content, and I want to just get better at it. I want to sort of recommit myself to it. Okay, we will check out that video, Commander. Thanks for posting it. Commander did a great show. I didn't get to see most of it because I had to go, but I did check in, and I'm gonna watch that again. Hopefully, I'll get to finish it. But they did a Trump Harris debate, and I don't know which video that is, but they also played a video this morning on a premiere of a cool little number they did, and Commander makes some really cool content. They do a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, we'll get back to this conversation, Joe. So what were you asking? You were asking about my education, which is basically non-existent.
Oh, well, no, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can learn it without it. I just didn't, you were talking about taking classes. I didn't know if you were taking
Yeah,
classes.
no, I want to do that. I'm kind of like Dr. Taps actually convinced me that I should apply myself enough to go and maybe get a degree or two and work on stuff that I'm interested in because I'm super curious about it. And our conversations about things sort of leads me to like think maybe I'd be good at it. And I don't think I could truck for another 30 years, but I think I could think for another 30 years.
Right. Well, I mean, you're already past intro to physics, at least how it's taught here.
Yeah. Well, in Canada, it's a little different, but like, yeah, I think the stuff that I took in high school probably would be a lot like a physics 101 at most universities or colleges. But it probably wouldn't be quite as in depth as what you'd take if you were like really streaming yourself into a heavy science education nowadays. And the other thing is like the technology that's changed in that period of time. Like we're talking 30 years. It's
Sure.
Yeah.
A lot hasn't changed though. And C is one.
No, I mean, like what Einstein came up with is 100 years old, like and older. But like, but yeah, this is it's an interesting conversation. Now, this muon thing here is interesting because, and I think most people probably have heard of muons, but they might not really know what muons are. But they are these particles that come out of cosmic rays, and they hit the Earth's atmosphere, and they do have this remarkably short half-life. But relativity explains why out of 1 million of them, 50,000 of them nearly make it down to the ground, and can be measured on Earth, and they can be measured. Like you can measure them at 10 kilometers above the ground. You can measure them on Earth, and you can also work out what's happening. What's the muon experiencing? Can you actually put on a muon suit and skydive from 10 kilometers? No, but you can do the math, and you can detect these particles, and you can figure this out. And what's going to be really interesting here is I think people should take bets. If people don't mind, please put your money on, if you're into gambling. I'm not, but put your money on, are we going to get a big nuh-uh, or are we going to get a very well-reasoned, mathematically coherent aether explanation of what goes on with muon? What do you think, Joe?
Yeah. I'm guessing nuh-uh.
Well, I don't want to.
This is why I asked if Dr. Tap worked underground though, is because of muons.
Yeah, so from what I understand, he doesn't work like deep underground. I can't remember if he's on the. He's not way up in the air. I know that, and I also can see the apparatus he used has a lot of shielding around it.
Yeah.
But I think the stuff they're doing maybe isn't relevant to that.
Right.
Yeah, and Commander's shilling for their channel, and please do go check them out if you're not familiar with them. I think most of the people watching currently are, but if you're coming to this later, Commander does some cool stuff, and we love to see them succeed and continue on with their work on their channel. They do fun stuff, they do serious stuff, and they do serious stuff in a fun way, which is, I think we all enjoy that, right? So Joe, I'll roll some more of this and we'll see what happens, see if our predictions are semi right.
Empirical measurements. And I want to add one more thing on top of this. One of you mentioned, I loved it earlier, that you want to take us back to empirical measurements, science based on empirical evidence. We all agree that the original intuition of human beings was there should be an absolute frame, there should be some medium filling it, and things should move in relation to it. It is only through empirical study of nature and empirical measurements that we have realized that our original intuition was simply wrong, which is nothing to be ashamed of. We're just human beings, and we learn about the true nature of nature, dare I say.
All right, cool. I'm going to answer this question,
Muons?
and then you guys are going to answer some questions. All right. So one, like you said, you've never weighed a muon. It's derived algebraically based on its energy and velocity. Two, you don't know where that muon that you're measuring was created. The hypothesis is that cosmic rays hit material in the upper atmosphere, then there's some particle pair collisions, and then a muon pops out. Just based off of its half-life alone, you don't know where it was created. So the hypothesis that it had to be created up here and it's measured down here, therefore link contraction time dilation is a cool story.
That's not true.
Now back to the Michelson, Gale, Pearson, and interferometry and stuff like that. So here we go. Let's pull this up.
Can I address this? I'm sorry, you're misrepresenting my position. We know where muons are generated. We don't have to go into why they are generated. We simply know there's a certain altitude where a lot of them show up. Above it, they don't show up. Below it, there's fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer of them. We don't have to talk about how they come to be or what mechanism causes that. We simply measure the amount of them. It's zero or close to zero above a certain altitude. Then suddenly there's a lot. There's fewer and fewer. We have measured their mass in laboratory settings ad nauseum. And we know, therefore we can measure their velocity. And we certainly know the distance from ground up to the place where a lot of them show up magically. It's a simple measurement.
So yeah, particles interfere with precise measurements in nuclear physics. Yeah, thank you, Joe, for that. And hey, Victoria, Dr. T does nuclear physics. This is particle physics. Well, I'm gonna say, you are Victoria. I am Victoria is how I usually address them, because that's obviously what I would say. When I read you are Victoria, then I obviously am Victoria. Nuclear physics. So this is about particle physics, and Dr. Tap has some tangential stuff, and I think Dr. Tap works with whole atoms, and there's some entailments from the work they do with that. But Dr. Tap has he has knowledge of subatomic particles as well, but he's a quantum physicist or an atomic physicist, and I think Dr. Tap, I don't know if he would call himself a nuclear physicist, but the nucleus is involved, but it's not specifically related to nuclear energy. So I guess hopefully Dr. Tap will talk to me again this week, and I'll verify with him what we should call him and how he represents his type of physics. But yeah, he would understand this. Yeah, this is some pretty fundamental stuff for someone going into higher level science But yeah, third year physics, that doesn't surprise me, Victoria. Victoria, you're probably far more educated on this than I am, but I've read about these things, and I'm about to do some math work with them, and I'm interested to see how this all goes. Well, I'm trying to sort of build up my base knowledge. But Alan kind of baselessly just pretended these things don't exist. What do you think, Joe?
I think he has to.
I think he has to as well. I don't think he has a choice. If muons exist, and sadly for him, they do, and they come down like this, and we see them, we measure them. Like, this is what Peter's pointing out. He's like, we didn't just pull this out of our ass. We didn't just say maybe muons exist. We went and checked. There they are. We take them to a lab. We can weigh them. He's like, you don't know their math, the mass of them. But he's like, no, we do. Now, I'm going to assume, perhaps wrongly, that Peter can pull out some papers. And the reason I'm going to guess that is because I know that earlier on they pulled out some papers to verify other claims that were made.
This is recent discovery stuff where you're getting into with the muons and stuff. As far
yeah,
as
it's recent. It's recent, but it's not like there's no papers to verify this. Like it's more recent than when I was in school, but it's not so recent that we just found this out last week.
Right, compared to the things we've been talking about here, it's recent.
Oh yeah. No, this is far more. But I think Alan from Space Audits and Shane pride themselves on being on the cutting edge of physics, and I think they had in their intro. And Joe, I did that on a different day, so if you want to go watch some of what I said that day,
I was here
on Friday. Oh, you were here? Yeah, you were here. So you heard that? Yes, of course you did. But I don't remember when I've seen people. Do you know how many times I see people as I scroll around on YouTube?
Right.
I can't remember one thing to another. But I do remember going through their intros. I think like the Peter and Lucas were bringing us things from the 2010s and the 2020s and other times. And we had very modern experiments from 1926 from Alan and Shane. They brought up some really recent stuff. And they're on the cutting edge here. Not so Victoria's telling us here, not hard to create a muon beam, it's not hard to measure their mass with a magnetic field. Dr. T might shy away because it's not hard. Yes, that is true. That is true. That's a very good point. Everybody please post a magnet in the chat so that I can lord this over Dr. T. I don't know if I can do that from here though. No, I can't, right? It would have Magner. Yeah, I tried to get I can't from this app. I can't make a magnet show up. But I also can't type because my fingers are giant. Which I can't even prove right now.
I'll just step away for a minute, Al.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Joe. If I try to make my camera work, it mutes me. And I don't have sound coming out anymore. Okay, how about now? No. Okay. I might have fucked up the whole stream. Here we go. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to mute, unmute. Okay, testing. There we go. Okay, that's working. Thank you, Victoria, for putting that in there. Yeah, that's what I want to do is get everybody to put a magnet in here. And yeah, that'll be fun. So I'm assuming it's okay for Joe if I just keep playing this. We'll see where they go with this conversation.
All of these are simple measurements. Some of them are more involved because you need precise laboratory equipment to study a muon. But all this is routinely done.
And the other thing,
so
this is empirical.
No.
This is empiricism.
In order for your hypothesis to be true, it would have to have been created at a different altitude than what it's measured at. That's a cool story, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't give you mutual exclusivity because you don't know where it started at. You're just making a measurement, and you're just making a measurement in the sky, and you're like, oh, it would have actually had to start it up here even further, but because of link contraction and time dilation, we measure it here. dude.
That's not what happens. We
Okay.
know where they show up. We have measurements
Okay.
now.
Oh, all right, your position's noted. All right.
Okay, now present your position. Present that this is not true. Present empirical evidence. Stop hand waving mythical ether. Show us empirical ether.
That depends on time dilation being a factor, because even when you're looking at it, right, you're depending that muons are up in the upper atmosphere, Lorentz contracting away, and that you have a time dilation effect before it hits the ground. And that's what makes your empiricism make sense. But really, it's just oscillation. You're just decaying a cesium atom, maintaining that oscillation rate consistently. That's all it is. Go ahead, Alan.
Where's the cesium atom here? Where's the cesium atom in this experiment?
You're talking about time dilation, right? So you're assuming that that's happening in full propensity and correctness
in
for your
this
measurements
particular
to make
experiment,
sense.
I'm not measuring time. I'm not employing atomic
For a
clocks here.
muon to be a measurement, to take a register, right? For it to register, you're assuming that it's from somewhere and that in the atmosphere, it's actually Lorentz contracted, right?
Here, right here, when it says muon flux, that's measured.
No,
the flux is measured.
you don't know where muon detection comes from. You're just gonna measure it and say that actually it's based on empiricism.
Why don't you explain it to us, Shane? Where does muon detection come from? How are muons detected, and what do you think they are?
Listen, when you're going to take a measurement of muons, right, from muons, radioactive particles from cosmic rays, right, in the distance, you're taking it from this part, right, in the atmosphere where the muon is at rest. But actually, the atmosphere is Lorentz contracting. You have a time-dilated effect for it to be measured. And from that, you're assuming all this nonsense about cesium atoms, which is decaying at a constant rate, right? And it has, wait, what's the rate, Alan?
The half-life?
That's relevant.
Yeah.
What do you, so there's...
Okay. Time dilation can be tested here on Earth. Yeah, it can. And in fact, time dilation was one of the things these guys brought up, and it was a very simple experiment. And where that go ahead, Joe.
It's predictable. Do you know why?
Why there'd be time dilation?
No, do you know why time dilation is predictable?
No, Joe. I'm gonna let you explain it to us because my brain seems to be shutting down.
It's completely based in C being constant.
oh yeah. Well, yeah, and I guess these guys are gonna say it isn't. Yeah, no, I get it. Well, no, you're right. That is sort of that's
the
an
math
entailment
anyway.
of C. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. My brain's fuzzy, but it hasn't fully shut down. I am.
Well, I mean, when they say if you're moving at that, there's a hypothetical they give that if you're moving at so much the speed of light, whereas one day would pass for you, 50 years would pass on Earth, right? They don't just pull that out of their ass.
The twin experiment
it's a math problem.
Yeah.
But it's also scalable. So you can start in the bottom level of a building and go up in a real top building. And as long as you have two clocks that will run at real precise timekeeping, you can measure the difference just because of the effect gravity has. I mean, it's I don't know.
You're quite right, and that was, and so one of the experiments, and you may or may not recall this one from last week, is one of the experiments that Peter and Lucas presented. Was the one where the guy took, he took his family minivan, he had his kids in there with him, he took, a bunch of atomic clocks with him to the top of a mountain, left a bunch of others that were calibrated and synchronized the same, and then they went there and came back. This is, and Victoria, you're quite right. Like, thousands of people use this in their daily work. This has been operational. Like, you're right, Victoria. Like, Victoria, it's stupid that they're saying this isn't happening. And Shane's
that's
just
what
laughing.
I meant. It works every day.
He's laughing at these guys saying we have these experiments. He's like, no, it's like cesium decay. Like, okay, show us the paper where cesium decay is shown to be muon.
But they also
is that what he's saying?
Seconds.
He's saying muons raining down on the Earth is from cesium decay. Now, I believe the cesium atom is used in an atomic clock.
Yes,
frequently.
they have detectors that the cesium or the muons hit the cesium.
They hit the cesium.
It lights up for a
gotcha.
second.
Okay, so this is what
yes.
I didn't look up what apparatus they use, and
they keep them in big tanks of water deep under mountains because they want to just get the muons and none of the other interference.
They want only the
from
muons
the radiation from space.
Gotcha. Okay. So, So, wait a second, Joe. Are you saying we actually have real apparati or apparatuses that are set up right now detecting muons? Is that what's going on?
Yes, it's a big thing.
Holy shit!
Yes, they're
And
deep. They're deep underground. That's why I asked that earlier.
okay, I want
Because
a show of hands. Everybody. Well, how about a show of thumbs up and thumbs down? Thumbs up if you think that every scientist that has ever worked in this field has never considered having to deal with cesium decay being worked out of this as a potential reason for muon detection when they came up with this apparatus. And thumbs down if you think that not a single scientist is as smart as Shane to have thought about making sure that the apparatus didn't give a false positive. Can we please have that? And Joe, what about you? Joe, we're not you. Neither you. I can't get my camera to work, and you're not on camera, which is fine. So, tell us which way your thumb is pointing right now.
I forget what the two questions were.
Oh, sorry. Thumbs up is that scientists thought about what Shane came up with, and thumbs down is that you think that scientists totally forgot that there might be what do you call it variables that need to be looked variables that were not considered by the super dumb scientist that invented an apparatus to detect muons, that they never thought of trying to have confounding variables allowed for.
Right. They've accounted for these things.
Holy shit. Okay, so your thumb is okay. So PC's got hers up. Victoria's got their thumb pointing in the same direction as the top of their head. So I think that's a thumbs up.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I think Victoria's in Saskatoon, which is on my side of the globe and your side of the globe. It's in my country, but that's way further away from my house than you are, Joe. But yeah, I think Victoria is not on the southern hemisphere, and so that's because that's an Australian thumbs up, I believe.
Yeah, that too, I guess.
Anyway, for Shane to say this is just fucking brutal. And PC's looked up the Haefel, or I think it's Haefel, but I could be wrong. Haefel-Keating experiment. What do you want about the Haefel-Keating experiment? I'm not going to take us down this rabbit trail. How is that racist against Australians? Australians are antipodal to me, sort of.
Because you called them upside down.
She called them upside down. They call it down under. Do you think that the shrimp, when they're on the barbecue, they don't fall off because they're stuck to the grill, or is it because of gravity? Post a shrimp in the chat if you like that. You're trying to be inclusive. All right, Victoria. Well, I don't know how calling me racist against Australians is inclusive. But I guess I've been included amongst those that are taking the piss out of the Aussies. One thing that's great about Aussies is that they like to take the piss out of everybody too. They're kind of like Canadians like that. Except we say sorry when we're done.
Why do you think that they put these detectors so deep underground?
Well, I think it's because they're trying to keep them from getting fucked up by neutrinos.
Because of variables, right?
Well, from variables, like trying to keep other energy sources and things from fucking them up. Is that what it is? Are they
right? Because there's other things variables that could affect.
Make sure you didn't detect a bear shitting in the woods.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So to then turn around and pretend you didn't account for any variables and blah blah blah.
That's basically what Shane's saying. He's laughing and saying, "You're an idiot. You didn't think of this."
That's exactly how experiments are designed, is to limit it to the variable you're trying to observe. Right? I mean,
yeah,
it's part of the scientific method.
Yeah. because of all the cosmic rays and other interferences, Commander. And Victoria seems to be quite erudite on physics subjects. And I feel like Victoria and I, we know we live in the same country, but I think I've forgotten to ask Victoria what they do when they, which they don't have to share. But if Victoria, if you want to share what it is you do and what you know and why you know it, go ahead and we'll give you 3 magnets in the chat for sharing. But don't feel obligated. There's no need to dox yourself or anything like that. I'll keep playing this. I don't know if they're gonna. I don't think these guys are dumb enough to say water sticks to a globe, but we'll see.
2 things that I'd like to pull on there. So you make a mention of cosmic rays, and I did actually read your website description about this. So I'm wondering what your explanation for this phenomena is in relation to cosmic rays, and in particular, are cosmic rays inside or outside of the absolute lab frame?
Do we know cosmic rays definitely produce muons that are detected on Earth for certainty?
We don't need to. Not for this argument.
That's the hypothesis of the
argument.
mainstream narrative.
No, we know where the muons show up in our atmosphere. We don't need to discuss how exactly they come to.
I just want. I'm stopping it for a second, Joe, because Peter is pointing out something important here. He's pointing out that we do in fact detect muons at 10 kilometers. We do in fact measure how many of them make it to the ground.
We experiment with muons.
Yeah,
We've done it in accelerators too.
Yeah, it's what's the thing is. What's important here though is they're like, but where did the one you found at 10 kilometers? Why, like, what happened before 10 kilometers? Where's the cosmic ray and stuff? And Peter's like, I didn't include any of that shit in this because I'm just showing you that from 10 kilometers to the ground, we measure and calculate this, and it works perfectly when we use this equation that he puts on there, which I actually can't read because my eyes are fucked and it's really
Look
small.
Look how smug that fucking idiot looks too. Look at the top
he's
box.
like,
yeah.
If I was gonna make a Muppet for the Muppet Show that was called Mr. Smug, I would just take that and I would start cutting out foam.
Particle detector control systems. Victoria has observed muons.
So you did particle detector control systems, but now you just ask people if they tried turning it off and on again. That's Victoria. I love it.
It's funny because I got a degree in IT and then learned physics on the side.
You learned physics on the side. See, I think the thing is though. And this is great, Victoria. Thank you for sharing. But you know what the thing is, I trained at my young time. I really loved science as a high school kid. I think I loved science as a younger kid too, but in high school I was really like, I love learning about this stuff. It's so cool. And I would talk to some of my friends about stuff like that. But I never got an opportunity to get into it because I was working in construction. And I used to call myself a constructionologist. I still do sometimes because I know a lot about construction and the science behind it. But there's a lot more to it than I ever got a chance to learn. So I kind of feel bad about that. And I didn't get great marks because I was working a lot of the time in my dad's business, which I then eventually took over. But I kind of spent my time. I learned how to be a carpenter, and I learned a lot about construction and construction management, project management. And I had to learn how to run a business, which I didn't like because it wasn't my cup of tea. But now I drive heavy machinery on heavy trucks.
Well, let me make a statement about that too.
No, go ahead.
Because, and I'm not trying to. I know this isn't atheist content and stuff, but one of the things that I say on my channel when I talk to creationists and stuff is that when you assert that you already have all the answers to everything, there's nothing else to learn, right? But whenever you let the evidence and things take you where it leads, to the conclusions that it leads to, that's when you really make discoveries. And what happened, the reason that they're in this position to where they're denying muons and stuff is because it doesn't work for their conclusion that they've already decided that they have all the answers about this, and it doesn't fit in. And you can't rule out things as impossibility because it doesn't work for your preconceived conclusions. You have to allow for that. And that's why so many people in the atheist community get so excited talking about science and stuff, because it allows you to go that extra step and actually learn about the world and the universe around you. You cut yourself short, and you remove all the awe and wonder from the universe and the natural processes that make it do its thing, whenever you pretend to already have the answers to everything there is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just put up what PC said, and I took it down. I'm gonna put it back up, and she says keyword desired, and you know, she's absolutely right. Keyword is desired. But the thing is, in science, like you actually do, like, you put out a conclusion. It's like, if this is what's gonna happen, like, we see this happen, why does that happen, right? And
Yeah.
when you work on science, you're like, you work your way backwards. You're like, well, if that's true, then what needs to precede that? What will make that happen? Right? And then you do an
Right.
experiment. So
You can
look, I
have
made it happen, or it
hypotheses.
didn't.
You can have hypotheses, but you
Yeah,
test the hypothesis, not the conclusion.
exactly. But
Post
what I
hoc
mean is, like,
rationalization is a fallacy.
yeah, no, that is dumb. Like, it is dumb to try and make it work or massage things to fit. And they're accusing all scientists of doing that. That's essentially what
Yeah,
they're
right.
doing. And buddy here, Shane, is like,
I like
he's
when they say science changes all the time. It's like, no shit.
yeah, of course it fucking does, because we're willing, and I appreciate, like, not necessarily everybody here is an atheist or thinking that way, because you can be both religious and scientific at the same
Oh,
time.
sure. Sure.
You know,
I'm not excluding
believe
that. I'm
in
just
God
saying why
and
it's
believe in muons simultaneously. You just can't believe in maybe certain types of God or whatever. But yeah, adapt with new. This is an important thing. Adapt, right? Like this
yeah.
word Crystal brought up here, and
Yeah.
I agree, Joe, that this people who are atheists for reasons like of leaving or doing a deconversion, like trying to leave religion or not liking what's going on in religion, are different sometimes from people who are like, well, not like the hypothesis of a God is just not necessary for everything we see, and they don't start out with religion. They're kind of two different camps in a way, and atheists agree on one thing, and that's what makes them an atheist, is
Well,
gods don't believe in them.
that,
And I'm more of the, I heard about it when I was a kid and it didn't make sense, and the more I looked into it, the less sense it made.
well,
But some people really like have hung their hats on this heavy, right? Like,
yeah.
and if
Well, no,
if your income depends on it, I mean, like some preachers and stuff, I mean, holy fuck, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Well, that's well, I won't address that yet. But the thing with it is that there are plenty of religious people in science. In fact, I think the latest number was like 51% of the science of scientists are practicing scientists are religious. That's fine though, because they know how to separate their faith from their study.
Yeah.
But whenever we like, science is descriptive in a lot of ways, right? It's not prescriptive.
Yeah.
It
Exactly.
it describes the world around us. It doesn't. Whereas religion, it tells us what the world is, and it if you take that literally, which creationists, that's why I pointed to them specifically, they that's where they screw it up, is because they're like, well, science has to fit within this box that I've decided is the way things are, and science is under no it doesn't have to do that.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It doesn't owe you shit.
Yeah, absolutely not. So, and I'm just looking at the clock here. I've got in about half an hour, possibly, I'm gonna have the physio coming, and I'm starting to get pretty tired, just physically.
I'm sorry, I held up your.
It's okay,
your
Joe.
review.
No, I've been doing this for 2.5 hours here, and I want to do this again. I want to come back to this and go through the rest of this. And there's, I guess I've made it halfway through the whole video now, and I don't know. I don't know if at the end it might be like a bunch of super chats and stuff, and I'm not going to care about that unless there's questions tied to it. I don't remember whether they do it like that. Like I know on MDD, like you can give $5 and ask a question. I don't think Jaron does the same thing, but maybe he does. I'll have to look, because I definitely didn't watch the last 10 minutes of this. I watched the main part of it though.
So Jaron isn't part of this debate. He's just hosting it.
He's just hosting and moderating. Like I remember he does jump in a couple of times when they start like arguing with each other. And I think that's like that's pretty important. But yeah, I think we should get that. I think we should get that together. So Joe, and you're welcome, Joe, to come back anytime. But if you want to come back and talk more about this, you've been adding a lot to the conversation, and Victoria too has added a lot because they have knowledge of particular things that they're talking about. But what I find interesting is like I knew that muons had been detected because I read about it, I heard about it, and I think like for leaving this conversation here, I'm just going to say that these guys are hung up on the origin of the muon, as opposed to the fact that once it's detected at 10 kilometers and then comes down to ground level, it works. The relativity math works on it in both reference frames, either from the reference frame. Tuesday night, you're going to take a nap. So you know what? I'm going to have to look into my schedule then, Commander. And I'll get a hold of you on Discord this afternoon after I look at what's going on. Because if I can make it to meet you for a coffee down there, I will. Yeah, down in Niagara Falls area. Okay, so Wednesday would be like the best day probably. And I've just got to check. I know Wednesdays and Thursdays I have conference calls every other one, and that's this week. But the atmospheric muon experiment is done in third year because you did it in third year. Well, there you go, Victoria. And so
this is someone who has observed muons in many different.
Yeah, so they did. Victoria did the experiment, right? And I forget. I've been calling Victoria they because I can't remember if Victoria is a male, female, or other type of person. And it doesn't really matter because our gender identity doesn't matter. Muons don't care what gender or sex or whatever you are. So I guess it doesn't matter.
Your junk doesn't decide whether you
Victoria says she, her. Okay, thank you for clarifying. I don't know why I always forget that, but Victoria, because Victoria is also like a place name and an era and a queen and stuff. People can use that name, especially in Canada where it's such a common name for so many things. And it also can mean victorious and stuff. So I didn't want to presume. I'll try to remember that, Victoria. And I got to remember that you're an IT professional who used to do particle detection work. That's pretty cool. I should see if Victoria comes and talks to people about stuff like that. You're more worried about getting other people. Yeah, I'm worried about getting people's pronouns correct as well. But I think I'm gonna end the stream on the note of let's come back and look at this again. If I can manage to have the energy tomorrow, I'll do it again. And yeah, I mean,
whenever you want to do it, you want to do it. If I don't catch you, send me a message, and because I would love to come, even just watch from the chat.
And you're always welcome. And yeah, Victoria is quite unprofessional. Okay, Victoria, you have no idea how unprofessional I am. Except when I'm trucking.
Well, that's okay in IT because you just got to tell people about their IT 10T errors and.
I always thought the IT crowd, is that the name of that cool British show with Richard Ayoade? I love that show.
What show?
It's just I think it's British. It's I'm not sure if Richard's from there or not. But anyway, so it's the one where there's like there's two tall guys that work in IT, and then this woman that comes to work with them who has no idea what she's doing. She's from some other department. She becomes the manager of the IT department, and these two guys are IT professionals that actually know IT, but they do the work. And they work in for like a large company in the basement, and they're in this little thing. And there's a bunch of computers and like server looking shit kicking around that looks like garbage. And they just sit there and they take phone calls, and then they go and fix stuff up in the office tower. and it's most of it has nothing to do with IT. There's a few in jokes about it. It's mostly the weird interpersonal relationships amongst these people who are probably what I would say stereotypical IT professionals who are a little odd, because I think we remember those computer geek type people from high school this way, and this is what they look like 10 years later working in an office tower. But there's a lot of funny stuff that goes on with them.
So a funny story: when I was in college, the only class that I ever flunked out of and had to retake was my second year programming class, and I actually my advisor had passed away because of cancer, and we got a new advisor, and he wanted to teach C, but he didn't really know C, so he was going to learn it along the way too. And at the beginning of the year, he set the final exam to be a certain project that, given the parameters within C that we were going to learn, you couldn't do. And I knew how to do C already, and I told him, I said, you can't do that without using arrays. And he said we couldn't use arrays, and I said, well, you can't do it. And then at the end of the year, I was the only one in the whole class that had a working final exam, and he failed me because I used arrays in it.
Okay, well, there you go.
Everybody else passed.
That's, even though they didn't, theirs didn't work, but yours was done. Yours was done against the instructions and function.
He couldn't even get it to work. So,
no, of course he couldn't. I mean, this is. I don't want to get into telling long stories from my work. I think I've told this one before, but this is one of the things, like, and no offense to engineers, but I had a situation where two engineers from the same engineering firm, one an electrical engineer, one a mechanical engineer dealing with HVAC and plumbing, drew up a drawing where they showed a very large pot light. This was back in the 90s, late 90s, maybe early 2000s, before LED lighting became something you could go and buy for reasonable amounts of money. Nobody was doing this. And they had, so the pot light, because of the way they wanted the light to come out of it, was a special light for a presentation room. It needed to shine a certain way. So it had what they call a baffle in it. It had a reflector in it. And this thing was 18 inches tall. And it was probably about 9 inches in diameter on the inside. And then it was even bigger, had an even bigger trim on it. And there was like 3 of these things to go in. 2 of them needed to be, based on the floor plan, installed into a high pressure air duct. And most people that haven't worked in like really large buildings probably don't know how fast the air moves in a high pressure air duct. But if we did this, you would just hear constant whistling. Nobody would let us do this, and we knew no one would let us do this, because you don't cut holes in high pressure air ducts and just stick things into them, because it creates all sorts of problems with airflow, which is what that
essentially are putting a reed in there.
Yeah, essentially, it's like trying to punch a hole in it and then try to seal up the hole and then not have this whistling sound. So the whistling sound was the least of our worries, because it just wasn't going to fucking work.
Right.
And then we came in and had a big meeting about it. And I remember having a 4-hour meeting with the engineers were there, and of course the architects and everybody were like, well, why didn't you look to see where this was? And they're like, well, you asked us to have this there, and we came up with the best lights for the situation, and we didn't really notice that it was going in this duct, and we didn't know it was so tight and whatever. And I'm like,
we wouldn't have thought anybody would do something that stupid.
At that point in my life, I'd only been working at this full time for 10 years, and I was like, yeah, guess what? It ain't gonna fucking work. Because like, of course the ceiling's that tight, and everybody can see on the drawing the fucking ducts there. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do. I mean, these are massive, massive lights. I mean, these are really big lights. If you can't find something smaller, then we either got to move them, or we got to like move this duct. And they're like, is moving the duct practical? And I had the mechanical contractor there, and I was like, I don't know dollars and cents how practical that is, but I'm going to guess even if the building let us do it, it's going to be costing tens of thousands of dollars and take an extra month or 2 to get done.
Yeah.
And the mechanical contractor
for the
nodded
lights.
at
What
me.
the fuck?
And I'm like, if you guys want to spend that kind of money to put 3 fucking pot lights in, I mean, let me know. And they're like, probably not. And then they called me and said, can you call the building and ask them if they would let it happen? And I called the guy that was in charge of it. I said, they want to ask this question. You want to come have a meeting about it, or you just want to tell me no right now? And he came up and visited. No. He's like, I tell you what, the next time I'm up on your floor, I'm going to track you down. And this was a big enough job. I was like camped out there for 3 months, but I had an office set up. I had a nice corner office in downtown Toronto. So yeah, I was there. He came, he's grabbed me. I said, okay, this is it. They want to move this. They want to move this way over there. He's like, no fucking way. Just tell them no fucking way. I was like, I'm going to send you an email and copy you and all of them and say, as per our conversation, no fucking way, which I came up with a more professional way to put. And yeah, I mean, shit like that happens. And that's the most ridiculous the conversation ever got. But I think this is the type of thing that happens a lot. It's people that think they know better than somebody else or aren't willing to go check something, refuse to accept reality.
Well, it's like mechanics hate engineers.
Yeah, kind of. And I think like contractors are not a whole lot different. Right. And I think his name, a lot of times contractors and mechanics and other people like that are pragmatic. They're like, we got to get this done. How are we going to get it done? It's like, let's do it the way it works rather than the way they drew it. And a lot of times the drawings actually say like, this is kind of like a rough intent. You figure out how to do it. Sumami says that's my mom's life story. Yeah, I don't know what Sumami's mom does, but it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, you got to be fucking pragmatic, right? It's just kind of a thing. So yeah, and honestly, like I'm not good at things I wish I was good at. I'm good at things other people tell me they wish they were good at. What are you gonna do? We all have our lives to live. We got to get to where we're at, and lots of people do good jobs of stuff. I'll come back tomorrow if I can. Some other time if I can't. We'll see how it goes. And I'm just gonna just gonna say goodbye to everybody, and I'd wave at you, but my damn camera don't work. So thanks, Joe, for joining in. It was really nice to have you here.
No, thanks for it's an interesting topic.
It is, and I know you and I are supposed to do a stream together sometime, and it's never come together. And I think this is kind of fun to do with this topic, but we'll do something together where it's just a chat about who people are and what they do and stuff, and it'll be fun. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to end the stream now and thank everybody.